It's late, but I'm going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. We had some. All right, I'll use this. Good evening, everybody. My apologies, we're getting a little bit of a late start. We had some parking issues downstairs for some of us. So I'm going to go ahead and call the Personal and Finance Committee to order. And let me welcome our new member, Supervisor Ratcliffe, to the committee through our budget process. Thank you for joining us. And then just to let everybody know the process for tonight's meeting, in section B of the agenda is amendment packets, and it's listed by committee with the respective departments listed below there. So what I'm going to do is go down that list in order, and we will have anybody wishing to speak from the public, wishing to address the committee about any budget-related matter under that area of relative to that committee. And speakers will have up to 3 minutes to address the committee. And committee members may have questions for you as well. If you have not done so, please complete a registration form, so I know you are here wishing to address the committee or just register your support one way or the other. And give me a second here while I get... registrations in order here. Okay, and then after hearing from the public on the area of the budget relative to the committee, we will hear from committee chairs after that. So also, I think in our packets here for committee members' information, there's a request by Chair Corrigan for department heads to provide a status update on their equity plans. So we should have those in our packets as well. And sustainability, yes, thank you. So just an FYI, those are included along with the budget amendments. So with that, our first committee of oversight is the Zoning and Land Regulation Committee, which has oversight over Register of Deeds and Planning and Development. Is there anybody... I have one registrant wishing to speak, and that would be Supervisor Heidi Woodlager, ZLR 1, Operating 1.
I'm just registering in support of it.
Oh, my apologies. You're here for information support and available for information. Thank you, Supervisor Woodlager. Outside of that, I do not have any more ZLR registrants. Is the chair of ZLR wishing to address the committee?
Hello everyone. I'm going to let Director Violante speak to that since he baked it. So.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Supervisor Miles, how would you like for us to proceed? Would you like for us to address the budget amendments first?
Yeah, just the budget amendments.
Okay.
The understanding is that the committee has heard from the department heads on these matters, so but welcome you for questions from the committee members. Supervisor Bogg, did you want to speak to the one amendment that CLR has forwarded?
I'd rather have Director Violante do that.
Okay.
Since he was a key person involved in that.
Please.
So what this budget amendment does is adds $10,000 to our Dane County Housing Initiative expense line, with the primary focus of supplementing our housing summit, our annual housing summit budget. Right now on that line we have $2,000, and that's a very minimal amount to maintain any sort of a summit. It really places a great emphasis on fundraising, soliciting partnerships, and Our staff person, senior planner Olivia Perry, that is our primary housing planner, does a great job every year with the Housing Summit. This year was a really wonderful event on October 10th, but it entailed a lot of fundraising and reaching out to a lot of entities for sponsorships. And this edition, we would wholeheartedly support as a department. The addition of these funds gets us in the ballpark of still being able to maintain a very good event, but still positions us almost as a necessity to still pursue those partnerships and sponsorships. So it's I think it's a more responsible funding level for this, especially in light of the priority of housing in our community, especially affordable housing. And the Housing Summit each year goes a long way in providing information, educating the public. We get a lot of engagement and participation by the various communities in Dane County. Each year we have more and more of the cities and villages and towns representatives attending, and I think it does a lot to further the cause.
All right, thank you. One more thing, my apologies, to just update everybody on the process. We are not acting, the committee is not taking any action on items tonight. We're just considering the amendments forwarded to us from the various committees. We'll be taking action on things next week. So, with that, are there any questions for either Supervisor Wallach or Todd?
How many years has the Housing Summit been going on?
This was the 5th year this year.
And has it just continually gotten bigger with more participants?
It has. I think the first one was maybe 70 or 80 people. So it's grown into a full-day event. I think we had close to 260 people. And the surveys that we've acquired so far that have been returned have been overwhelmingly positive. So it has been growing.
And has the budget increased for the Housing Summit at all these past 5 years?
The amount in our expense line has stayed the same at the $2,000 range for a handful of years. We had a few opportunities this year. One of them stemming from the Dream Up initiative. We had an opportunity to supplement that budget by $9,500. As well as this year there's transferred from a line $7,500 to supplement the effort. So we kind of cobbled together other sources of funding. Olivia raised, I think, in sponsorships between $10,000 and $12,000. So this year, with it being the 5th year, we wanted it to be a landmark event. So we bolstered the funding, but we're anticipating in future years not maintaining it at that same level because it's a really all-encompassing effort to get it to that level.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? Questions on the amendment or the updates, the status update on equity plans and sustainability plans? Right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks for your support.
All right, that takes care of zoning and land regulation committee business, and we are now then on to consideration of operating capital amendments under Environment, Agriculture, and Natural Resources Committee, which includes Land and Water Resources Department and Extension. So moving on to those, it looks like our registrants, well, here I'll take first this registrant, Matthew Moberg, wishing to speak to operating 2, ENER 2, and I will put you in the list for the other departments when we get to those. You've registered for a couple of them, so. Oh, my apologies, you're speaking, we're registering in support, so. Okay, so my apologies. Matthew Moberg is registering in support for ENER 2, and I'll announce his other support for the other ones as we get to those committees. All right, next is wishing to speak in support, Bill Warner. wishing to speak in support of ENR Operating 2 and Capital Item 3.
Hi, my name is Bill Warner. I'm Chair of the Dane County Food Council, and I'm here to talk about two things and mention a third. First is the new food system coordinator. We just redid our new strategic plan, and we have these great ideas, and we have committees ready to charge, but you guys know as well as anybody else here, if there's not staff to help you, certainly not near as much gets done. It kills me. There's just a lot of different small things that we need to work on, and in general, there's certain things that kill me. You see a food drive that says, please bring no perishable items. Now, what's wrong with this picture here? Why give people healthy food when we give them canned stuff? I mean, aren't we all better off if they're eating healthy food? If we have a system in which we can incorporate healthy food into food drives and stuff like that, aren't we all better off? We keep losing family farms, which you guys would know. We're having fewer farms with more cows. Now, I'm not going to say we need to get rid of dairy, but it kills me to see we have a climate office change and we're probably producing the most methane of any county in the state. We need to find ways to grow little bits of food. Maybe we can grow some food to save some of these family farms, because they're just all getting bigger. There's just a lot of our committees. Obviously, we can't tackle each of those problems right away, but we can work towards, food in Anderson Park, food at Silverwood, food at these other parks. So, speaking of Silverwood, when that first got started, that was when I first joined the Food Council years ago, and that was my first subcommittee. And it was great. There's a lot of energy and stuff put into that. There was a vision then that got developed, and it's amazing. I hadn't been involved with Silverwood for about 4 or 5 years, and it's amazing what's going on there. It's good to see some really good projects going on. While it's not, as a farmer, it's not something that I can do all of it at once, but if I was not quite such an old fart and a younger new farmer, I would look at some of those things they're doing, and if it can make my farm a little better, can make the land a little cleaner and make it more sustainable, I would probably be able to incorporate 1 or 2 of the ideas they're working on. There's some really cool things going on there. And then what I didn't write on the paper, so I hope I can still say I'm in support of the ENR Operating 03. I know it has something to do with youth, and on our farm we try to keep youth involved because they're the ones that are going to be doing this next. And so anything we can do to keep them involved, whether it's on our council, whether it's with other projects, we need to keep the youth involved, or get them involved and then keep them involved. Thank you.
Okay, our next registrant wishing to speak, this will be on ENR Capital 3, Daniel Bussey.
Mr. Chair,
And you'll be followed by
I wondered if we could be a 6-minute team just in case.
Okay, let's try to do your bit, and then I'll start the clock when the next person does that.
Just reference the map that we gave you.
Okay.
Dan is hoping to be a donor to Silverwood, and he's going to speak on the specific topic of the Heritage Apple Orchard, which is in the lower right portion of your map. And our budget amendment touches on that project, so Dan can tell you about that.
Sure. We're looking to establish close to a 15-acre heritage apple orchard with heirloom varieties, and it'll be a demonstration plot of beneficial and good pollinator habitat along with it, so we can grow these apples completely organic on a good scale. I was a past president of the Wisconsin Apple Growers Association, and in the years since I have been, 5 orchards within the immediate vicinity of Edgerton have closed, or the owners have retired and moved on. And so there's sort of a lack of any orchards within probably 12, 15 miles, probably longer. So we're looking at this as a place for people to come and glean apples, learn about the history of heritage varieties. We will undertake classes on how to propagate apple trees, fruit trees in general, pest maintenance, pruning classes, all sorts of things. So it's teaching as well as the food gleaning. Any extra apples that we may have at the end of the season, if there's any commercial sources that would like to glean apples for, say, cider production or something, we would make those available at a very nominal cost. The monies we may get from that, we would like to put toward maintenance of the orchard and for Silverwood Park in general. I think it's a project that, with my experience of being the orchard manager at Seed Savers Exchange, growing apples at an organic scale there, lends itself to it, and this is going to be really a model project that I think is going to be really exciting.
If I could add to that, he's being a little modest. He's written books on raising apples. He worked at Seed Savers in Decorah, Iowa, which is nationally known for conserving heritage and heirloom apples and seeds in general. He grew up in the town of Albion. He used to take apples to the donor of Silverwood Park, Irene Silverwood, who taught in the Edgerton School District. So he's got local roots. He's bringing national expertise back to a county park. And we're really pleased that he's interested in working on a resource that the county can be proud of.
We'll be donating all the trees, planting, being there as much as I have to plant and to teach and to do this as long as I can. That is my goal. I grew up 2.6 miles away from there, so I know Silverwood Park very, very intimately.
All right. Thank you. All right, questions? Supervisor Plaza.
Out of curiosity, where do you procure heritage species of apples? I mean, by definition, they're rare or they're extinct or almost extinct, so I'm just kind of curious, where do you get them? You're going to be supplying them, but...
Number of sources, and the ones I've also found myself. I have a large collection of apples that I have been propagating for a number of years, and these are the apples I will be moving to the park. I already have them planted.
Very good.
Chair Carter.
I don't know if Kyle, if you could answer this, or maybe someone else is, but what part of this $35,850 would be used toward the Heritage Apple Orchard Project area?
It's on the back of your map.
Approximately 2,500.
It's a pretty small initially. I should also tell you, well, first of all, nice to see all of you who I know from previous board work, and those of you who I don't. And I forgot to send an email on the weekend to youth members, so I apologize. But the other thing that's in the budget from 2015, Chair Corrigan, is fencing money, which I believe totals about $28,000, and I think that went into the 2016 budget. And we're intending to fence this orchard too to keep it away from deer. So that's another portion of county money, but it's not proposed for this amendment, obviously, because it's already in the budget.
But it has not yet been spent.
It's still in the Land and Water Resources budget? Yes. And then I hope you saw the in-kind donation estimates too.
Right, I did. I just am curious as to what your timeline is for spending the other portions. I mean, you've got this money that you've had for a number of years. Why the delay in spending it?
The fencing money was explained to us that it's such a large amount of money for fencing at a county park that we would have to send that out for bids. And we asked at one point if we could piecemeal some fencing at the park, and we were told, no, you're going to have to send that to Public Works and send it out as an RFP because it's a large amount of money. So we kind of just sat on it until we got a large project, and this is the large project that we've now identified.
I'm glad to hear you're going through Public Works for a project. That was one of my other questions, is that when we're reaching the thresholds of when it requires Public Works involvement, are we doing that?
Yes, so the stone house, as you know, at Silverwood was refurbished, and the Friends of Silverwood is about to sign a lease, hopefully in November, with Dane County to assume responsibility for the farmstead and the stone house in Silverwood. We're aware of the requirements of Land and Water Resources and Public Works to send things out for bids if they're large projects. So we will continue to educate board members that we have to come back to the county for large items. There may be a request at some point to drill a new well at the park for irrigation too. So that's something that obviously is a large amount of money, and we'd have to come back to you. I just want to point out a couple of other things on this list. Agroforestry projects. The county board was good enough to put $19,000 aside last year for a capital project at Silverwood, which is in the ground now. In the middle of the bottom of your map, it's an agroforestry demonstration area. It's for alley cropping, meaning that you can plant corn, soybeans, other row crops in between fruit and nut trees or bushes. That's in the ground as of May 11th or something. We also planted a windbreak. There's more of a request in this budget amendment for windbreaks to block blow from conventional agriculture and pesticides into the park. The Friends have asked Land and Water Resources and Parks Division for the last 3 years to allow the entire tillable acreage in the park to go organic. That's been granted as of this coming January. So we're concerned about, particularly our neighbor in this area where you see the words Silverwood County Park. There's a lot of spraying in that area that blows north and east into the park, and we're wanting to block that. If you're a certified organic farmer and you get any blow into your field, you become uncertified. So that's the reason for that.
Other questions for our speakers? Daniel, Kyle, thank you.
We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Before moving on to a couple of supervisors that are registered, I'll announce that there are registered in support of capital item 3. We just heard about Janine Richards of Black Earth and Supervisor Whitelighter. So, wishing to speak, Supervisor Trella, in regards to Ener capital amendments.
I didn't know higher.
That's fine.
Okay. So first off, I support all the Ener operating amendments. As you saw, I voted for those in committee. I think they're all good ideas, but I wanted to focus on the capital amendments. The first one is a manure composting project in cooperation with Endress Farms. When we look at all the phosphorus pollution that's happening in our lakes, particularly in my district, that's a big issue. We have to look at how to deal with these copious amounts of manure, and Endress Farms has been partnering with the farms around them to do manure composting that really reduces the weight of the manure, and they're doing some innovative things around piloting how to get that on the ground to absorb water and also to keep those that phosphorus out of the watershed. The good news about this amendment here, it's part of the Ahara Clean Fund, so it won't add anything to the capital budget. It just shows our intention to spend this money out of the Ahara Clean Fund, which I believe $1 million has been allocated to. The second amendment here is to increase the floodland acquisition fund program by $3 million. I'm really happy that it came unanimously out of committee with strong support, and it's also co-sponsored by the committee chair Michelle Ritt, Supervisors Kilmer, Buckingham, Weigleitner, and Erickson, who is here with us tonight. I really feel like it's important to address root causes of flooding. In the last 2 years, we've seen a lot more rain than we typically expect. This year, I believe we're a foot over, and we've had some real concerns about how much rain is coming and how we're going to deal with it all. So this deals with root causes and looks around Dane County and identifies land that we can purchase and target things like wetlands restoration. And the root cause of trying to keep water where it falls, I think, is something that's going to be beneficial for the entire county, and making some investments up front right now could potentially save us millions down the road. I also really happy to see all the money we're investing in dredging, which is vitally important. The last amendment I'm going to speak in support of here is Ener CO3, which is the agroforestry project. As we're looking to combat climate change, we have so many farms across the country, and if we can advance these agroforestry practices, it'll help us when we're looking to prevent soil erosion, and also we're going to need trillions of trees planted, and there's no better place to do that than American farmland. And I really think having this, real-world teaching environment where the public can go and pick apples and learn about organic farming practices and also agroforestry, I feel like it helps producers and it helps the community as well. And then I had two just quick comments on the other amendments here. I saw a $30,000 one for a study on water levels in Goose Lake. In committee, I believe $15,000 was asked for, so I just wanted to bring that to the committee's attention. And yeah, that's all I have for this evening.
Any questions for Supervisor?
Yes, thanks for coming by and supporting the capital amendments. On capital 01, there was mentioned at the justification section at the bottom that there was a compost study in 2017. Did ENR review that compost study, or has that study even been completed?
I would have to check in on that. I know that this is a continuation of a project that we've already invested in, and I know community partners like the Clean Lakes Alliance have been working on it as well, and they also came to testify in support of that. But I can report back to the committee on that study and get more information on that.
Was the support based on the fact that the study recommended that we go forward with certain things or certain processes? I'm just trying to find a way of what we're trying to. I know what we're trying to accomplish here, and I know this is a good project. I've seen the project numbers, but I like to think that we're following a plan here, or at least an implemented plan for. Because you talk about phase 1, phase 2, and your justification.
Yeah.
And I was assuming that was in support of, or at least coming from the actual study.
Yeah, what I can do is we have an extended narrative on this, which is like 4 to 5 pages, which details the history, also does a cost breakdown and talks about how much the farms will be paying versus how much we'll be paying and what the goals and objectives are. And I believe it references the study in that. So why don't I forward that to the committee, and then maybe it could be attached to the notes so it would be available for
Thank you
everybody.
very much. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Supervisor.
Hi. So for ENR 02,
Yeah.
okay, so increased expenditures and borrowing proceeds by $3 million for the floodland acquisition program.
Yeah.
So would that be for wetland restoration and or for literally holding water back before it enters the Yahara?
Yeah, that's the intent of it. There was just actually the day that we passed this through committee, there was a land purchase that was made in the town of Vienna, which did something. It was an internally draining wetland. So the plan for the committee is this money will be set aside, but any land purchases that come through will be approved by the committee as well. So when we look at those land purchases, we looked at the assessed value of the land to see if we're purchasing it around the appraisal. And in committee, we try to ask questions about, where it's located in the watershed, surrounding areas and flooding issues, and try to get an idea of the metrics on what volume of water is preventing from entering.
Was this, did this come by chance from some of the recommendations from the Lakes and Watershed Commission, TAC, Technical Advisory Committee?
I don't know if it directly came from the TAC, but we did have the Yahara Lake Levels Task Force that a few of us were on.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and so one of the things that we discussed
was this, I think.
Yeah, was land acquisition, and my apologies.
So I should be added to this one because I was on the task force.
Okay, awesome. Can we do that? Can we add Supervisor Stubbs to that?
So,
Sorry for that oversight.
Chuck, can we make the request?
Making a note of that right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Please add my name as well, since I was on the task force as well. And it was a sort of roughly in the long-term types of objectives for us to be looking at.
Yeah, so I think what we were looking at is dealing with the symptoms, which is working on the dredging, and then dealing with the root causes, which is looking at the land acquisition and wetland restoration. So they were all components of what the task force recommended.
It was a combination of wetland restoration and strengthening stormwater standards
Yes.
especially in areas of redevelopment.
Yeah.
You guys are trying to-
A follow-up question on that too. As you're reviewing these acquisitions,
Yeah.
what kind of technical parameters are you setting for the effectiveness of flood mitigation, I guess, for these projects? Are you looking for more wetland type of projects that are wetland type of land acquisitions
Yeah.
that would hold more water naturally without any improvements? Or are you looking to make certain improvements in the land to help with the flood
Yeah.
mitigation?
I think it's a combination of both. When we look to purchase different parcels of land, for example, the last land purchase was done next to U.S. Fish and Wildlife land. So any opportunity we have to like create bigger parcels, or if there is land that could potentially be developed, which would create more storm runoff, I think all those factors are looked into. I could forward that question to Director Hicklin, Laura Hicklin, from Land and Water. We usually get a pretty extensive presentation that includes maps and reasoning, and it'll give us like a close-up map and kind of like a bigger map so we can get a perspective on the entire watershed.
Any other questions? All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Moving on, our next speaker, who had earlier registered in support, but she does want to address the committee, and that would be Janine Richards of Black Earth on capital item 3.
Hi, I'm here representing the Savannah Institute and speaking in favor of the resolution regarding Silverwood Park. The Savannah Institute was involved in the agroforestry demonstration that got installed at Silverwood Park this spring, and I've personally been working on that project for over a year now. During that time, I've been so impressed with the Friends of Silverwood Park and the time and dedication that they put into caring for the park, and also the large-scale vision that they have for moving forward with agriculture and natural resource conservation at the park. This includes the development of external partnerships, such as the partnership they reached out and developed with the Savannah Institute, as well as external fundraising efforts that they're currently have underway. And I also want to bring your attention to the uniqueness of this site and the potential educational resource that you have here as plans start to be developed for agricultural education at Silverwood Park. It really is a one-of-a-kind resource, and the vision that the Friends Group has advanced would make it regionally unique in terms of being able to demonstrate a wide range of sustainable agriculture practices, ranging from organic row crop agriculture all the way to kind of more traditional conservation and oak savanna restoration and every gray area in between, really fusing the idea of agriculture and land restoration. So that was what drew me to want to work on the Savannah Institute, to want to work at Silverwood. Originally, the agroforestry installation that we put in there, demonstration area, is the first of its kind in Wisconsin, the first publicly accessible alley cropping demonstration in the state. We also installed a tasting orchard at that site, which has over 40 varieties of woody perennial edible plants, fruit and nut trees that can be grown here in Wisconsin for people to go and sample and also understand better how the growing practices behind those.
With about 30 seconds left.
Okay. We've also already used it as an educational resource for a field day that has hosted visitors from as far away as Illinois and Fond du Lac. And it has helped to develop or to catalyze conversations with the NRCS about how to advance more agroforestry practices on private lands across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Jean? Thank you. Okay. I have two other registrants wishing to register in support. That would be Shannon Meyer of Madison and Matthew Mulder of Madison. And then our final speaker, other than the chair of the committee, would be Supervisor Jones. Is registered wishing to speak in support. Is she here? Oh, there she is.
I'd like to bring Laura Hickman with me to speak, if that's okay with you all.
Okay.
Thank you. So thank you, and I'll try to keep this short. I value your time. And I wanted to speak this evening about Capital Budget 2 and Capital Budget 5 of the ENR Committee. So the first one is the one that is Supervisor Chawla spoke of the $3 million for wetland restoration, right? Do I have the numbers correct?
Yeah.
Yes. And it was in our committee meeting at ENR just a few days ago. It is recognized that this is not just a problem in certain areas of Dane County, but it's a huge Dane County issue, Wisconsin issue, statewide issue. But for these monies to be set aside, I came to the realization that we're also asking a lot of our friends groups that are conducting a lot of great work in over 20 of our parks throughout Dane County. And the amount of work they're doing it just for the joy of restoring and beautifying all of these parks for us. So in speaking to Capital Budget 5, which is the one that I'm asking for monies to be set aside and managed, it didn't come in front of Environmental Ag Committee, but I believe that for things to be equitable and for our friends groups to be able to do some of the things that they're doing for us for free and to make our parks beautiful, we do need to have some sort of line item or budget for them to be able to get the tools and things that are necessary. All of the flooding issues that occurred in Eric Morgan's district, in her beautiful park in Middleton, it was devastating. And a lot of our parks were washed away, and we need to do something more for these people that are basically having fundraisers and bake sales in order to do things to keep our parks going. Laura and I spoke about a few different ideas, and the way that this is written currently is probably not exactly 100% of the way that I would need for it to be, and so I've asked Laura to come up and speak about some ideas as to tweaking this capital line item.
Sure. So if the proposal moves forward, the department request would be that grants would be overseen by the Park Commission. So land and water staff could certainly support the effort and develop application materials and criteria. My hope and recommendation would be that the Park Commission could oversee and make recommendations for grant awards. I'd like to propose a maximum grant award of $25,000, or excuse me, total project cost of $25,000 to avoid the public works bidding issue that was referenced earlier, and to help manage expectations on the size and scale of the projects. Historically, when we've partnered with friends groups, we've tried to make it a partnership, and so our preference would be to have a true partnership in the form of matching cash from the Friends organization. One proposal is 75% county, 25% Friends. So with the $25,000 total project cost, that would be a maximum grant award of $18,750 from the county. We'd like to have, excuse me, grants go to 501c3 organizations that are registered as friends groups or partner groups with Dane County. So we have a few groups. Trout Unlimited would be a good example. They're not technically a friends group, but they do
volunteer and initiate projects on county parklands, and if they're registered with us, we would invite them to participate. But we also want to have some structure in place to make sure that the funds are going to a fiscally responsible and viable organization, hence the 501c3 status. We do have some groups of people that call themselves friends of, but if it came to actually awarding a grant to them, there wouldn't be an actual entity. We want to make sure all of the projects are reviewed at the department level and that are either consistent with the master plan, if one exists, or otherwise signed off on by staff, and then set the expectation that the friends groups would have the ability and capacity to implement the projects.
Anything else?
I believe that that's everything. I guess I would just address the capital budget item 3, which is a fabulous project that Silverwood is speaking about. But this would be a fund that then all of our friends groups could participate in, and this would be a good place for Silverwood to also participate in those matching funds.
Supervisor Stubbs, question.
My question is, Laura, you spoke to a 501c3 registered group, friend group with Dane County. Where has that officially been held or housed?
So our
That
Parks
system.
Volunteer Coordinator
Okay.
has a registry, and so a group can be a nonprofit and do work on our parklands, and that's wonderful. And that happens all the time. To register with us, though, means that they're also committed to partnering with us, to helping document the work they're doing on our public lands, and to have, I wouldn't say it's a burdensome level of accountability, but to help us track what they're doing and make sure that their volunteer hours and efforts are being recognized and included within our overall volunteer program.
All right. Any other questions for Supervisor Jones?
Yeah, Laura, what was the breakdown in the grant, the grant shared cost?
75 county, 25 friends.
Okay, thanks.
Supervisor Jones?
Has this proposal really been reviewed by the Parks Commission? Have we got any kind of support from the Parks Commission, or have they asked for any kind, or asked to be part of this, I guess?
No, it hasn't been reviewed by Parks Commission because it was something that just was added to your agenda maybe 2 nights ago. And it really blossomed out of our discussions about capital budget at ENER. So it was just a recognizing that this is something that it would be nice for all of our friends groups to be able to participate in. And with the amount of land that they're being asked to invest in their own free time and to give back to the county and to restore and make beautiful for all of us to use, it just seemed like we needed a greater budget and expense. And at first I had asked that it go through Environmental Council because they also have a budget, but it made better sense, since these are parks, that it would go through the Parks Commission. I can't imagine that it would be onerous to them, but you do raise a good point.
Laura, did you recommend having the Parks Commission do it because they've done grant before? I mean, have they done grant programs before?
Yes, they have.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we will hear from the chair. And committee members, I'm going to sort of switch up my order because this is a little awkward having the chair come after the public speakers. And I actually don't recall how we did it last year. It was my first time running this meeting. So after this, just for chair of committees, I'm going to proceed after this, asking the chairs of the committee, relative committee, to address the and give an overview of amendments, and then I'll move on to public speakers. I'm sorry, I know you were opening your son's birthday.
And my son turns 18 today. Yay! And he is waiting on cake and dinner, but he knows Mama's got another job here too, so. Okay, you'd like me to address all the amendments, correct?
Or in the very least, the ones that haven't been already covered today.
Okay, so with Eater Operating 1, it is an amendment for $1,000 for the tree board. Supervisor Clausius is the main sponsor. I co-signed it. The tree board is a little-known but beloved committee, and they have a very small budget that Executive Parisi put in his budget. It's of $3,000, and this $1,000 would go exclusively to purchase trees for our amazing Arbor Day event, which takes place at a local to the county school every year, and it would just enable us to fulfill that part of the mission even more strongly. Questions about that one? All right, Eater 02, the food systems coordinator for $40,500. This is to add a 0.5 FTE. During the last budget cycle, the position was started at 0.5 FTE, so this would bring it up to a full 1.0 FTE. And this food systems coordinator works with the Food Council, Extension, the Gardens Network, Dane County Food Coalition, many other groups, and to work more with more structure to feed more people in our county, I think is amazing. So this would bring us up to a 1.0.
Questions? No? I have a question on
Yep.
that. Is so there's an existing half-time, so it would become a full-time? Okay.
Yes.
Or is it going to be a shared position?
Carrie? Full-time, yes. I thought so. I didn't want to speak out of turn.
Great, thank you.
Okay, operating 3, the video project. This is, as you all know, I am a teacher, and even when I'm sitting with my supervisor hat on, you cannot take the teacher out of me. So this $15,000 is to create a series of videos, very short videos for brand new members. And the goal of it is to hopefully remove barriers and improve accessibility for more people, more citizen members especially, to join more of our county committees, because it takes away the unknown. Short little videos would be produced in Hmong, Spanish, and English, and the topics of them would be about Robert's Rules, parliamentary procedures, to take away the unknown of, a lot of people are afraid to think about joining a county committee because it seems very, difficult and overwhelming, and so this would hopefully improve accessibility for more people to come in. And it would be a combination effort headed up by Extension that would also involve our youth governance members, so it would increase the youth voice as well. And it fits in exactly to our Engage Dane that we started on the county board, getting more into bringing more government into the lives of more people in a really meaningful way. And a side note, the original cost for doing this project came in at $40,000, and I've already reduced to $15,000. So I'm trying to be, thoughtful with county dollars as well.
Questions?
So,
I recognize them back with first and then.
How did you already reduce it down?
We are going to push for as many in-kind volunteer sort of donated services. For instance, like we have kids already in the youth governance program that speak different languages, basically using more volunteer labor and then potentially doing fewer videos. And we're expecting this to be successful and beloved, and so then we would continue with another ask next year to have even more videos. So that's how we did it.
Supervisor Erickson?
So is this 15,000 for additional staff time?
It's mostly to help get us connected with the professional services to create an excellent quality video product in the end.
Okay, so who will be actually like in the video stuff? Will it be staff, or current staff, or youth
We
members?
will not be able to hire like Robert De Niro or
Well,
anybody like that. Yes, it'll be, the youth governance students will end up taking a big leadership role in this, and the vision is that it'll be current staff people with
okay.
the youth governance members.
So this is kind of for time or additional staff time to be able to do this, or the outreach to a professional, I think.
More the outreach to the professional,
Okay, all right.
so that we end up with the quality product.
Okay,
And it
all
could be incorporated into the application process for citizen members to apply for county committees or commissions. And it may also even be used for new supervisor trainings. And I envision that it'll also be on the website, the county website, so that it's accessible to the public in general.
Okay.
Pretty wide reaching.
Any other questions on this side? Okay, proceed.
Okay, capital amendments. Capital 01 is for the compost spreader, which Supervisor Chavla spoke to pretty completely on. Any questions about that one? Oh, I guess I should mention that to back up, all of the amendments that I've mentioned so far passed ENR 5.0. Okay, Capital 02, the Floodland Acquisition Program. Supervisor Chavla spoke well to that one also. It did pass ENR 5-0.
Oh, Supervisor Clausen.
Is there money already in our budget for that purpose, or is this new money for a new program?
Let Supervisor Chavla, main sponsor, take that one.
Sure. Yes, the existing fund has $3 million. This brings it up from $3 million to $6 million. And we had discussions in committee where could we spend all that $6 million in 1 year? And according to Director Hicklin, we can definitely do that because there's a number of properties that meet the criteria here and that would be beneficial.
Thank you.
Any other questions on FY02?
Okay, Capital 3, the Silverwood Park amendment for $35,850. That did pass through ENR. The vote was 3-2, and it was a big discussion at ENR, one of the longest in ENR history, and it was pretty, like, to share some of the discussion, people agreed very wholeheartedly that it's not a question of the projects that Silverwood does. Those are all valid, they're all important. The concern would be more summarized with the equity of county money going into our parks through our friends groups, not equitably. I mean, Silverwood comes up with amazing projects and a very formal way to ask every year, but the discussion was not against the projects, especially that apple orchard, which is a phenomenal idea. It was more about how do we create something that it makes the monies accessible to all of our friends groups more equally. And connected to that, you heard from Supervisor Jones a few minutes ago about P&F Capital 5 for the $100,000 potential grant program. I did sign on to that as a co-sponsor. That idea was born out of the ENR conversation of this past week, and Supervisor Jones took it and formalized it into an amendment. I can't speak to how the vote would have happened because we didn't vote that way, but it was born out of that conversation, and I wholeheartedly support this approach to make the monies more equitable.
Questions on either of those? All right. Anything else? There is one other amendment that was introduced after the committee, and that was the Canal P&F 06. If you're familiar with that.
Yes. We were not able to vote on that. We had it's Goose Pond, right? Who's
Well, so
Lake?
here's
Lake or
Lake.
Pond? Lake? Okay. So we had a speaker several months ago come and speak to us about flooding issues there. And there was one person that spoke again last week who brought this idea forward to do a study. And he was not familiar with the county process for how amendments work, and that's why it was introduced late. He just went, after the meeting, he went to his supervisor, Knoll, and asked him to put this through. So I can't really speak to how we would have voted because we didn't, but we've heard from several members in the community about concerns about the flooding. But we haven't had the discussion yet, so, and I really don't want to speak on behalf of all the voices at Ener. At Ener, it was proposed that possibly this community could qualify for a grant that would help pay for this, but the details didn't go beyond that, so I don't know what the likelihood of that happening would be.
Any questions on that? Okay, that's it. Thank you, Supervisor. Oh, my apologies.
That's okay.
Supervisor
So not
Stiles.
question on this, but just question on process. I was surprised to find budget amendments here regarding the Dane County extension that never came before our extension committee. So for future, you should always make sure that you bring those budget amendments before extension members, so we can at least have that conversation before it gets to P&L. So just a future comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then in our packets again are the equity and sustainability memos from both Land and Water Resources and Extension. All right, so that takes care of departments under Ener. We're on to Public Works and Transportation. And so the chair of that committee, please, Supervisor Ripp.
It's actually easier for the chairs if people spoke first. Okay, Public Works, operating one. The zoo had put in, sort of in conjunction with staying open later during the summer, in the evening. They had put in for an animal care manager, 2 zookeepers working with the animals, a vet tech, 1 janitor, educational specialist, and a half a clerk. This amendment removed the manager. There was some talk at the committee. It was difficult to amend, on the fly type thing. And usually you do that on the fly, you goof it up. So, but basically this removed the zoo manager position, which worked in animal care. Rearranged the zookeeper into a lead zookeeper instead, and added a janitor. It passed 4-1. I was the one to vote against. I won't vote for cutting animal care people. I wouldn't support that. Operating 2. Okay, this was Supervisor Erickson. Basically, the zoo is offering scholarship for basically children and youth that need the help to go to their programs. Supervisor Erickson feels that he's a heck of a good talker and can raise $20,000 from the community, correct? No?
No, that really wasn't it.
Okay, but that's kind of like reducing by 20,000.
To spend 20,000 on what we call scholarships for the many programs that people can pay for kids and families to participate in zoo activities.
Someone will pay for it instead of the county.
No, I want the county way around.
Okay,
that was supposed to come out of
Well, what this amendment does, it just reduces the revenue from the education programs, the
Okay.
recognition that there would be slots for scholarships. Right
Okay.
now, everybody has to pay.
Okay, that wasn't
If some
quite
got
the
it
way
free-
it was
if some
explained
went
there,
for free,
but,
then we don't get as much.
yeah, the net effect was the revenue was going down 20,000.
Okay.
Operating 3, okay, that was pulled by Supervisor Wegleitner. She had put in an amendment for the airport and she pulled it before, so we never brought it up and voted on it.
Operating 3?
Mhm.
Okay. But just what is it
Okay. It shows no vote. So.
All right, it was never brought up because she pulled it before she explained it and then pulled it before we made any motion. Capital 1 was on the Land Center. There's no money put in the budget to basically move forward with expansion out there or modernization, those sort of things. So there were 2 amendments on that. First one was basically to do the schematic design, and the second one, which is, Public Works CO2, was to basically keep retaining either Vanderwall Associates or, to someone to work with the community. So they're kind of a package type deal. Capital 3. Several supervisors that I just copied these immediately, so I don't have any clue on who all joined in, but basically would be purchasing the lactation rooms that can be moved. It's not necessarily built into a wall type thing, they're mobile. And 100,000 was allocated for purchasing 3 of them. And it listed where those 3 would go. I've heard since then that the actual government code is 19,000, so we could theoretically purchase a 4th one. So I'm hoping that we can verify that number, that we add in the land use center. They're actually the one that brought it up to Board of Health. And they probably have more people passing through there than pretty well anywhere else. So all these other ones have been, 5-0 vote, or been unanimous, the youth member also. And the last capital amendment, basically, right now, the county's been building their own trucks. We get the chassis and then we build the rest. This past year, we sent it out for a private company to do it. And just asked for a study on the effectiveness and the cost savings or versus, just to look at it and see what's the best. Staff head said that's no problem, they can do that. So, again, that was unanimous. That's basically all that was presented to us. No one else has talked to me about any other amendments. So.
Okay, so we do have some other ones here.
Okay.
But first, we'll see if the ones you presented, both operating and capital, members have questions.
That needs to be added to CWO2 capital for line energy.
Questions?
I have a question.
Supervisor Erickson.
On which, any?
Erickson first, on operating or capital.
Okay.
Supervisor Erickson and then Councilman Clausen.
So I have a question on PWT 01.
Operating 1.
Operating 1. That's
Probably get Rhonda up here too, she can probably explain a lot better than I can.
Okay, yeah, I want to hear from Rhonda, but, so this happened in Public Works.
Right.
So can someone from Public Works talk about, why, or can you talk about why, what was the rationale? You talked a little bit about it.
It's difficult for me to give the rationale when I'm the one no vote. So for me to give the rationale for the majority,
We have
I could be accused of
the
cheating
sponsors
very
right here.
easily, so
So
put it that.
the sponsors right here.
Can I ask the sponsor?
She was welcome to answer if she wants to.
Well, the employee group reached out to me regarding this. They wanted to add another full-time janitor and felt that a lead zookeeper would be more directly involved in animal care than another zoo manager. And so that's why we moved one zoo manager and one zookeeper, add a lead zookeeper and another janitor. We discussed this at committee for quite a while, and since the current, there was the general curator and manager was one position, the person was doing the two jobs at once, and now we have one curator and one zoo manager. And so then we'd have, with this amendment, there'd be 3 lead zookeepers as well. So it would be more animal care, is what I heard. And after reviewing the descriptions, I think that would be as well. So what we discussed at committee was that we could try it for a year and see if the curator and manager separate went over better. And if next year, if it was determined that the 1 year with one manager didn't go over well, then that the committee would be very supportive of having another manager. Or if somewhere we found the money to do a zoo manager, that they would be supportive as well.
Can I ask another question? Follow up to that?
Okay,
Please.
because I was going to say,
I'll get to it right in a second.
Good.
But this creates another janitor position, right?
Yes,
Okay.
2 janitors full-time.
So where there was currently 1, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so it adds
In the
another,
budget, yes.
it adds another janitor position.
Correct.
And what was the reasoning behind that? Was there a request for more janitorial work to be done? Or?
From the employee group, yes.
So they?
In the summertime, it was at half, and I think the executive budget made it 1 full-time janitor. And then in the summer, 2 other positions helped out with janitorial duties.
Okay.
And so the 2 janitors would have enough to do.
Okay. Can I ask?
yeah, I think let's stay on the subject here.
Okay.
Around this perspective.
Okay, so I don't know, I think I understand what's going on here. It sounds like we had a zookeeper manager and it was changed to a zookeeper lead. Maybe that's another one, but it increases 1 full-time janitor to 2 full-time janitors. So what's your thought on this? I had never heard that there was a need. I never heard that I'm on the zoo commission. I never heard that there was a need for more janitorial services at the zoo. I have some other ideas, which I didn't bring in this budget, that we could have a need for, but I wasn't aware of a need for more janitorial services. So what do you think?
Sure. So what I submitted as our budget and what the county exec submitted is what I believe we need the most. I understand the desire for 2 custodians. I'm not as sure that we will be able to keep 80 hours worth of custodial work in January and February. So I prioritize the zoo manager. I tried to explain that the zoo manager is a working position. We'll be working with the staff. And so by this amendment, you're actually cutting the animal care staff by 1 position. So I support anything that helps the zoo, but this amendment is not something that I support.
So is it correct to say that the zoo manager is actually working with animals the way a zookeeper would?
We'll be working alongside the zookeepers, yes.
Okay, so it comes down to a matter of animal care then?
Yes, and I had passed out at Public Works, and I can send by email a comparison of other zoos. And really what the trend is about 1 manager to 6 staff, zookeeping staff. With the proposed amendment, it would be 1 zoo manager for 16 staff, and for my proposal would come down to 1 manager for 9 staff.
Also, can I keep going? Also, what we just went through, feels like yesterday, but it was a few months ago. One of the issues that came up in regard to our accreditation was animal care, in regard to how many people we have caring for animals. Since it seems that the AZA places a lot of significance on animal care in terms of conservation efforts, but how animals are taken care of. So when we added like 9 positions, I think it was 9, right, to increase that, because that's something that we've been lagging on. That was a concern expressed by AZA. So this to me sounds like it would reduce the amount of time or hours or staff we have providing animal care.
Yes, and the other piece of it is that we did transition from a single veterinarian contract to the UW where we have 4 veterinarians. So the time amount in terms of a animal care working with veterinarian has significantly increased.
Okay, so and you would agree, our animal care is a big function of our accreditation, correct?
It's the most important thing.
It's the most important thing, okay.
Yes.
One other question, briefly, I don't know, Supervisor Ritt, or I thought I heard somebody talk about hours. Did you say something about the zoo hours? Not you, Rhonda, but Supervisor Ritt.
In the original request to the county executive, this was coupled with expanding the zoo hours for the summer months.
Okay, but Rhonda, what we could do though, if we are going to keep the animals outside longer, we need people to work with that. That doesn't necessarily mean that the zoo has to be open to the public longer hours.
No, it doesn't necessarily, but we saw it as a win-win because we would like to keep the animals out longer when it's nicer weather.
Correct.
And there's no reason that the community couldn't enjoy that as well.
Right, that's a whole other topic, but yeah, but the animals could be out longer, but they need people to care for them if they are out longer, regardless
Yes,
of what.
very specific people for shifting
Right.
and that kind of thing.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Supervisor Nelson. No, I think I might have a question. Rhonda, accreditation, we just reaccredited, what, September was it?
Yes.
And that's good for how long?
And normally 5 years, but for us it was 4 years.
4 years.
So we'll be up in 2023.
And obviously, there were some concerns, and Sue has done a lot of work, to make sure that we did get reaccredited. And obviously now I think you're already looking, working to make sure that in 4 years we get reaccredited again. So my question is then, what are you more comfortable with, the original proposal in the budget or this amendment as far as what you see as the best way to move forward to reaccreditation in 2023?
I personally, what I put forward is what I believe we need. And just to be clear, I was unaware that this amendment was going to be at Public Works until an email was forwarded to me by Supervisor Ritt on Monday before Tuesday's amendment. I did talk to Melissa, so I'm thankful that I had that opportunity, but as I said before, I want what's best for the zoo. In my opinion, as the zoo director, 28 years experience, and having done zookeeping, having been a zoo manager, and having been in a director role, I believe this is what we need most for Henry Burroughs Zoo.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Buzzes?
I had a question on a different amendment.
Okay.
Capital 1, I do not know what schematic design is. How is that different from architectural design or just plain old design?
Basically, it is going, right now we have concepts. And this would actually pretty formalize it so that you could see exactly how things are going to work. It's not getting down to designing a building per se, but it gets to that point. It's harder, well, I saw anyway, it's harder right now to go and sell, okay, we would need a restaurant out there. It's hard to sell the private, okay, you should build a restaurant here if they have no idea what everything else is going to happen.
So it is detailed, it's not just a line drawing.
It's detailed to a certain point. It's not designing a building. It's not getting, okay, this is going to be 4 floors and you're going to have bathrooms here, here, and here. It's not to that scale. But it is designing, going further than we are now.
And Will it be the complete property then, or just portions of it?
That's open to discussion, I think. As far as, you know, the money that's put in here is if we do the entire grounds, okay? There's been some discussion on doing a portion, because I haven't seen the study, but apparently the last study came out with it being much more expensive again. Okay, we may have to look at, are we gonna do the whole thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. Personally, I don't think we're ever gonna see a parking ramp out there, so, but that's my personal feeling.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, Chair Corrigan, since we have a revision to this particular item that you introduced, did you want to speak to it?
Right, and Supervisor Ripp and I are co-author, sponsors of PWTC 1 revised, and that's just adding in the justification, recognizing that we might not spend the total amount, and obviously with capital budget, you don't borrow what you don't need.
Right.
But the committee that has been looking at this and making recommendations still hasn't had the chance to dig into numbers on what the cost is. And I know the consultant is also looking at some other options since the initial cost, their initial numbers that came back. So that's going to go back to that committee. There are going to be recommendations from that committee on which piece to move forward. And this language really clarifies something that's been a laser focus of the Oversight Committee is return on investment, so that we are looking at what the return on investment that we on those initial things that we invest, and really wanted to prioritize where we can bring money back to the campus and pay the bills better, and then secondly, the stormwater issues that are affecting the neighborhoods around it.
Do you have any other questions on any of the amendments? Supervisor Ripp? All right, so outside of that revision, there's also one other item in our packet, the Downing County Highway GP and capital item 03. Supervisor Downing emailed the committee late this afternoon, I believe. And I did have a short discussion with him. So he submitted the email in lieu of making the hour-and-a-half drive back and forth home. But just to summarize what he told me, his primary concern on this particular highway is that it's not scheduled for reconstruction until 2025, I believe, and he's very concerned that it's in a state today that it should be a higher priority because of deteriorated shoulders and rough patches and potholes and so forth. So, do we want, does anybody have a question perhaps of Pam?
Yes, Pam.
Or Jerry?
Yeah, she's right there. Sure, I do have.
Can I speak on it too?
Oh, sure. Why don't you speak? Yeah, Supervisor Ripp.
I just wanted to say that probably every rural supervisor has roads in their district that are not good. We got so far behind years ago, we're catching up, but I mean, I think I have the best one. As you come from Columbia County on Y, there's a sign, you are now entering Dane County, and there's another sign on the same pole that says rough roads ahead. And quite honestly, that one's scheduled for the same time as this section. So every one of us who put these in because we've all got them, which is unfortunate, but
Thank you. I don't want to be debating tonight. This is an opportunity to get the information and questions, but I would agree because I have a couple in my district, as Supervisor Ratcliffe has gotten into this. But questions for Pam, you said you had Supervisor Nelson?
Sure, yeah. Well, just in the email from Supervisor Downing, it does mention that County Trunk Highway G, it looks like it's divided into two parts. One is scheduled to be resurfaced in 2025 and the other in 2021. And then there's a list of the projects that are in the budget for 2020 with their PASER ratings, their pavement, what is that again?
Pavement condition rating.
Yeah. And out of the 12, also, before I move on, both sections of County Trunk Highway G have a 6 phaser rating. 10 of the 12 projects for 2020 have a 5. 5 and 6, the higher the rating, the better the road. So 5 and 6 is fair, and 3 and 4 is poor. And there's, you know, if these were actually a 3 or 4, I could see maybe we need to put that in here. But and then 2 of the roads are a 6. I don't know that much about County Trunk Highways. I guess my question is, in addition to the phaser rating, do you also consider traffic counts? Because some of these, like County Trunk Highway B, B, A, B, it looks like they're probably higher. They're in more populated areas, so they probably are higher. Have more traffic than County Trunk Highway G. Is that is that part of the consideration for your scheduling?
Yeah, traffic counts a consideration, and also funding sources, federal funding or CHIP funds or different state revenue that we can get. So there's different things we look at. We can't just always look at higher volume roads, or some of the lower volume roads will never get done. So, you know, we have to take that into consideration as well.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, it's the County Trunk Highway G. It's in the schedule, so they will be getting done. But maybe it's obviously not as soon as Supervisor Downing would like. That's all I have. Thanks,
Do you reevaluate the priority for reconstruction of these roads? Like this might be moved up a year or something?
Correct. So in the spring, after the thaw goes out, I drive every single mile of road and re-rate it, and then take a look at where, you know, they're at. They maybe have deteriorated quicker than another road, so then they could move forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions for?
Have you looked at the road that Supervisor Downing has indicated, like recently?
No, I haven't had an opportunity to drive down there and take a look at it, but we'll certainly do that.
You did look at it in the spring?
Yeah, I looked in the spring and I drove it since then.
Anyone else? Thank you. All right, registrants, sorry. Okay. So for registrants, I have 2 registering in support, and that would be Shannon Meyer of Madison and Matthew Moberg of Madison, both registering in support of PWT Operating 1. And again, the department's memos updating us on their progress on sustainability plans and equity plans are in our package. Okay, on to executive committee. Chair Corrigan.
Yes. There were 2 amendments in executive committee.
Operating.
Duplicates.
Pardon?
They're duplicates.
There's exec 1, 2,
That was
and
correct.
3. And then 1 capital one.
We have
Oh,
2
wait,
copies.
you're right,
We
there's
have
2 copies of
of 3 of them.
You're right.
That's been updated, so.
So do we have the capital?
So what we have is operating 1 is the
Right, is there a
legislative.
capital one for exec?
There are.
Okay.
So, but there are 2, one is the Legistar, one is the county board state, so.
I'll just, on exec 1 is operating, and it's to increase expenditures to cover the cost of the county board contracts, lobbying services. We have a contract lobbyist this year. We didn't have the full cost of that in our base, so we covered the part of the year that we could. We need to put $54,000 to cover the base on that, so for future years. So that's added by executive operating 1. Executive operating 2, is that a capital one actually?
No, that's the maintenance.
Maintenance for Legistar. I thought you were correcting it. But it's executive operating 2 is to put money in for Legistar services software and just money that we need in order to keep our registrar up and running so that people can have access to what we're doing here. And then executive operating 3 increases by $40,000 the money in our policy, in our program and policy evaluation to cover the cost of a staffing study at the Alliant Energy Center. This has been a point of discussion about the use of LTEs at the Alliant Energy Center, and this would give, and we've seen kind of some evidence from the employee group saying that there would be an opportunity to create full-time positions out there, and there's enough work. The management there has questioned whether that would be possible. So we wanted to really take a look at it before we move forward on that, to be able to get an idea on the use of LTEs at the Alliant Energy Center. And
So in capital, we have 350,000 for the space remodel.
I'm sorry, I just don't have those here in front of me.
No,
So, okay, the 350,000 for the space remodel is just, we're moving the county board office to the 3rd floor. As Parksy moves to the 3rd floor, we'll be getting around to remodeling that space. We put some money in the budget last year for that. It's insufficient to cover the cost. There's more that needs to be done. It's been realized in order to get that space ready to be the county board office. It allows us to have all of our staff together instead of spread out in 3 different locations in the building. And then the second one is for $25,000 for the equipment for the legislative tracking system to keep that up and running.
And then we have one, are we familiar with we have PNF 02 decarceration, and for the intern PNF 03, operating 3, and operating 4 would be OEI training.
Those were not considered by the committee.
Wait, what were you saying? Did you say PNF 03?
3 is for the CASO
Right.
intern, and then
No, it's
4 is the work of OEI, including training support.
On the iPad, PNF 03 is listed as county board intern.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
Oh, okay.
That's the CASO thing.
I was just reading the title.
So, they were not considered by the committee, so I wasn't presenting them. I thought the others would be presenting them.
Then so I'll move on to people who introduce those if they're here. If there's no questions.
Can I ask a quick
Chair
question?
Corrigan.
Can I ask a quick question? What was the capital one? I don't have a copy.
There were 2 capital ones. The first one was for the space, redoing the space here on the 3rd floor for the county board office.
Okay.
And the second one was for legislative tracking equipment for that, for our registrar work.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Chair Corrigan? All right, then wishing to speak to her amendment would be Supervisor Wegleitner on PNF operating 2.
Thank you, Supervisor Miles and Personnel Finance Committee. So in June, I introduced a resolution to support a community alternative plan for housing, health care, and decarceration. And that resolution is still in committee. I have drafted a substitute resolution because the jail funding was approved and that plan is moving forward, but I still think it's important that we plan to reduce our jail population. And this planning process would be basically to implement that resolution and with the goal of significantly reducing the average daily population of the jail. And I was really interested, and I'm looking forward to reviewing in further detail the Familiar Faces report that was recently presented to the Criminal Justice Council. And that identified, I believe, 335 people that have been incarcerated with, at least 10 times in the last 3 years, I think is the figure. But I found it to be really interesting because you know, there was a demand from community members, largely led by people disproportionately impacted by incarceration and with people of color, that were asking for, you know, 300 our jail population to be reduced by 350 people. And so initially that was the goal of my decarceration planning resolution, was to reduce our jail population by 350 people over a period of 5 years. The substitute amendment doesn't make that aggressive target because some feedback I got when presenting the resolution to the Criminal Justice Council was that we're not sure we can get that far that fast. We've taken care of a lot of the low-hanging fruit in terms of you know, the easy things to do to reduce our jail population, but now we're having to really look at the data and struggle to figure out where we can more significantly reduce our jail population. Well, I think looking at how to better serve people in this familiar face group is a really important thing, and I think providing permanent supportive housing, a housing first model, is a critical thing. If we can house people in the community with supportive services, and we set a goal of providing 350 permanent supportive housing units to people who have a significant history of involvement with the criminal justice system, I think we would be able to not just meet our goals for reducing our jail population, which we need to meet in order to, I guess, not not exceed the limits of the smaller jail and safer jail that was proposed and funded by the county board, but we can go further. And I think we can really bring down those numbers and address root causes instead of continuing a revolving door for people who have behavioral health issues, a history of homelessness, contributing to their involvement with the criminal justice system. So this planning, this money, this $100,000 would support a consultant to staff task force that would engage in a planning process for a period of, 9 or 10 months if it could get off the ground in early of 2020, and hopefully provide us with their report by next September. So I think the substitute resolution has the task force consisting of between 9 and 13 people appointed by the county board chair and approved by the county board. But a majority of the appointments would be selected from nominations submitted by community organizations and groups working on reducing the number of people incarcerated, supporting people in reentry, supporting community accountability for law enforcement, expanding access to behavioral health, and expanding permanent supportive housing. Anyways, I think it's important that we continue to plan to significantly reduce our jail population. I think we have to do that if we even want to meet the goals we've already set for ourselves with the new jail plan, but I think we can go much further on our efforts to house people and expand behavioral health services. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know there's a lot of details in the resolution, and not all of them would fit in the budget amendment, so I'm happy to send you a link to the substitute amendment for the resolution. But a big part of what's in that planning process is asking the task force to essentially prioritize what is already been recommended to us in the Resolution 556 work groups, with some updates based on some additional data we've received since then. But I think a really important part is figuring out how much it would cost to create 350 permanent supportive housing units with case management services over a period of 5 years, as well as what it would cost to fund and operate a crisis center and other crisis stabilization services. So building on information we've received from the mental health study, where do we go from there? So evaluating the recommendations we've already received, and moving forward. And I think ultimately, if we're gonna do something big and bold, like significantly reducing our jail population, we need to know the total number. And if it's a question of, you know, we have to raise the levy in order to get there, we should at least know how much we would be asking the voters to approve in terms of raising the levy. So anyways, I think that's the right thing to do, and I think it would be really important to have a consultant and significant per diems available to people who are participating in this task force planning process.
Supervisors, have any questions for Supervisor Whitman? All right. Oh.
I guess it just would, I mean, I think that the Criminal Justice Council is working very hard on the same issue, and was wondering if you have looked at the work that the Criminal Justice Council has been doing with the Behavioral Health Subcommittee and has been directed to look at that, and have engaged on, for example, you know, crisis issues and trying to figure out how to, you know, do services to, and look at this familiar faces work, and whether you've looked at kind of the work of Jim Austin, who came to us with recommendations on how to reduce the jail population. It's work that we've been investing in as a county board, and I know there's other amendments out there this year, such as Supervisor Stubbs' recommendation on the Community Justice Center to look at ways to do that. If you looked at those and thought, like, why this is that and or instead of those other ideas?
Absolutely, it's not intended to be instead of. I think it's really important to look at all that data. I regret I don't have more time to be able to attend those work group meetings. I think what's a little bit different about this is, you know, the goal of the significant reduction, and then looking at all the kind of the recommendations together, and really identifying what that big price tag is. Not isolated, but also connected to what we might save with reduced security services staffing with the reduced jail population. So I imagine some of what has been presented by these experts is costs some money to implement. And so, you know, I think this is kind of to bring that and consolidate that information in one place, really give people most impacted a voice at the table, and to move it forward with an idea that we want to be bold, and we're going to need significant resources to do this work. So what does that look like? How much would it cost? And is that something then that the county board potentially could get behind after receiving a report from the task force?
Any other questions? Thank you, Supervisor Whitwagner.
Thank you.
Next, I will take up P&F Operating 3, which is Supervisor Young. Is listed as the primary sponsor of this item.
I don't think she was able to come tonight.
She's right.
She's
Oh,
she's
she's
here. Oh, I didn't.
here.
Oh, I saw you earlier. I just didn't see you tonight.
That's what you get for sitting in the back. Yes, so this amendment is to add another intern in the county board office. It is focused specifically on campus outreach with the goal of having someone there who is a current UW-Madison undergraduate student. I talked with Karen, and there was some other money in the innovation project budget that would allow this to be added on. With a lot of stuff that's been happening with Engage Dane, we've been talking about trying to interact with people we don't usually interact with, and having a second point of contact with campus, especially through a communication and outreach role, I think would be something that would be really helpful.
I have a question on what is the amount for this? Is it adding more hours or time, or is there an amount? There isn't.
It should be, it was supposed to be neutral. Is Karen still here?
We have funds in our LT line
Okay.
And so we talked about whether this can be either more hours for our communications and CASEL intern, who is in fact an undergrad and a journalism student, or if this is a separate LT intern. But the focus of including in their work a focus on the 18 to 24-year-old population is something it seemed like we could do within
Okay.
the arc.
So when this says the Castle Communications intern in the office, so you're talking about adding more hours to that position?
We could do that in order to efficient, if she were amenable to that.
Okay.
That might be.
You're not talking about adding this as a requirement without increasing the hours, correct?
And taking away from the castle.
Correct.
I would never think of that.
Okay, that's what I wanted to
That's right.
All right, thanks. Any other questions for Supervisor Young? Thank you. And Peanut, operating 4 is Supervisor Eicher.
Yes, thank you. So this came out of discussions with Supervisor Kuhn and Supervisor Stubbs. Our POS agencies are interested in equity training, and they have different needs, they're different sizes, and so it's really not known sort of what they need. So this is directing OEI to work with the POS Coalition to develop plans for equity training, whether that is training support, recruitment support, it's cultural competency training, if there's a need for a micro grant for a training, you know, what does that look like? We want to get an idea.
And it should be added to this one, Charles. Right, Annalise?
Yeah, I already emailed you, Chuck.
Oh, you're so nice.
Any questions for Supervisor? And for continuing them on to registrants, I have no one wishing to speak to executive committee items, but I do have registrants wishing to register in support. First being Fran Hoffman, the town of Berkeley, in support of PNF Quote 2, Operating 2, Eric Anderson, Primrose, in support of Executive Operating 3, and Shannon Meyer of Madison in support of Exec Operating 3, and Matthew Moberg in support of Exec Operating 3. These are all the registrants I have for Executive Committee items. Okay. And then again, we have our update memos on sustainability and equity from corporate courts, county board, and
Corporate court genders?
well, there's at least an update memo of status. Okay. So on to health and human needs. Supervisor Kuhn.
You just didn't look thrilled to be here.
For the record, I was early. I came early before this wasn't on supply, so I am proud of myself about that. Well, first of all, I'd just like to say thank you for adjusting. I know that you had originally had us slotted for tomorrow, and unfortunately I'm at an event. And Supervisor Young, she's going to join me. That's okay. At an event, so I appreciate the adjustment. I do want to just start out with sort of our philosophy and human needs about how we go about our budget process in the committee. And I think one of the things that we have done over the last 2 years in general is sort of prioritize the issues that we think are not more important, but issues that we would really like to focus on. So for us, over the course of the last 2 years, including the last budget, we really wanted to make sure that we had as many opportunities as possible to engage our youth, as well as provide funding and programming where necessary for the youth in our community who have a lot of complexities in their lives and who are working really, really hard to be a part of our community, and we want to make sure that they do not get left behind. We also have been focused highly on mental health and mental health services and been anticipating the long-awaited audit. We realize there are some challenges to the information that's before us, and I think as we continue into the next year, regardless of what is in this budget, our committee is really dedicated to working with the department and working with the community stakeholders on moving us forward on mental health funding and moving us forward on mental health programming. And I think two other issues that have been really important to our committee have been immigration issues as well as housing. We understand and we hear on a regular basis and at our committee and outside in the community that these two issues are paramount in figuring out how to service people in our community. And on every level, these issues, people are struggling with these issues on a daily basis, and it is extremely important for us to not lose sight of real people being impacted by the services we provide or don't provide, and the programs that are out there in the community and the programs that are not out there in the community, despite the dollar amounts that it may take to solve some of these challenges. We really have to remember, which we are reminded on a regular basis in Health and Human Needs, that we are talking about people, and that is the most important thing that we can do as county board supervisors. So thank you for all of that. I also want to, because I haven't had an opportunity to do this, but to thank Director Testman. This is her first budget cycle, and it's been a good one so far, and we've had some challenges, but she has been there every step of the way, answering all of the questions and making sure that her staff are readily available and engaged in the process. And not to mention also really focused in, despite our not always knowing the answer on how to fix certain challenges with staffing and making sure that people are served, really recognizing the importance of valuing our workforce and valuing the folks in her department that do really the heavy lifting on a regular basis. So that is my intro. Any questions? Good. So we will go through our packet. I do want to highlight for you that as in the year past, and again, this is not about the money, but we know that you guys have a very difficult job, and so we are also trying to be responsible members of the committee and do our due diligence in forwarding you amendments that we really believe in. We did cut over $146,000 from the amendments that were in front of us before we got here today. So, Amendment 2 is $50,000 additional dollars for Outreach Inc., which would like to fund a full-time staff position to work on AODA prevention and homelessness issues in the LGBTQ community. This was introduced at $50,000. We believe that there's some process work that can be done, and Supervisor Kilmer agreed to reduce his amendment to $25,000. Amendment 3. Okay, I'll do this. Amendment 3 is, I think the other thing to note, and I think this is a little higher than last year. We had several requests for positions last year too, but I do think that we have a few additional positions in our recommendations this year, and I think a lot of that, again, leads to the kind of services that Dane County is trying to provide, and that as our challenges, but also our populations grow, we can't do it with less people, and we probably can't do it with the same number that we have. So I think that is reflective in the increases in the positions in our amendments. This position, which we made adjustments to even prior to finalizing it before the committee, because we don't believe that it will start immediately. Some work has to be done on that. This is a project position. charged with developing and monitoring some of the community center mental health work, but also working in our AmeriCorps program, which for those of you who don't know Connie Benton and have an opportunity to meet with her, is a stellar public servant who will continue to do more and more work despite the fact that she does not have more time. And so we also wanted to make sure that she had some additional support, and really she is doing some really amazing things in the AmeriCorps program. And I was able in my other job to go work with some of the AmeriCorps volunteers, and they are dedicated, and she cares about them, and they know that, and you can see it, and she really could use some additional support to expand that program.
And then this amendment, Supervisor Stems.
Number 4.
Do you want to speak to your amendment? I would not want to misrepresent it.
Oh, fine. You do a great job. So this is actually adding a full-time program leader to the Community Restorative Court. You know, we were at year number 3 as a pilot program. And last year, under our former director, Lynn Green, conversation, our district attorney, Ishmael Hussain, said, hey, if the program expands, which the county executive joined us in expanding it countywide, but there was no dollars added to it. If we get to a point where we have more cases than bodies and there's no more LTEs to really use in that capacity, will you make sure that we are staffed adequately? And Lynn said she would do so. Well, we've had LTEs filling in this position, but if we don't add a full-time program leader, we will have some problems with this program. We specifically, I thought initially it would be a social worker, and after talking to Ron Chance, it was important to make it a program leader because it will give us an applicant pool that would be of diverse applicants, and I think that's also reflective of the program. Many of you know the Community Restorative Court is an alternative to incarceration, and it's 92% successful. So it is a program that is working with our 17 to 25-year-olds, launched in South Madison. It's grown across this county, but I think this is where we continue to meet the needs of the program, so I hope that you will be supportive.
And in addition to that, I think the other thing that we talked about while we were discussing this is just that it is really hard to see the cost savings as well as the community savings that result from doing more of this work, so we're very supportive of it.
This next amendment was Supervisor Kilmer's. It passed the committee unanimously, and it's cost to continue funding for senior nutrition program site. It is both of the program management itself and also the input costs, like catering costs have increased as well as staff costs. And from what we heard from Supervisor Kilmer and from staff, if they don't get this increase, they will have to cut some sites.
As well as actual meals, I
Yes.
believe. So, I mean, I think the challenge that we will grapple with for the immediate future is really that the population is aging in Dane County, and we are not going to, again, we're not going to reduce the number of services nor meals that we will need to serve this population. The folks that are working in this program really make very little money doing it, and we are hoping that we can help at least supplement so they can get paid for the time that they're present and making sure they get as many meals out as possible. Supervisor Whiteleitner, I'm sure can speak to this too, but this HHN 6 is about increasing the operations budget for eviction prevention financial assistance for the Homeless Service Consortium prevention coordinated entry providers. We did, this amendment came in at $100,000, and we did reduce it down to $50,000, but I believe the committee agreed that this is not, and there was some confusion between this money and money that the JFF officers get to provide sort of more like petty cash in emergency situations. This is not that. This is related to housing and other services that many folks who do not qualify for other funding through HUD can receive.
So this next amendment also
Supervisor Stokes, would you like to address your amendments on this?
Let me go ahead.
Sorry if that's not.
Yeah, so Resolution 7 is about a new not-for-profit organization called Families Back to the
It's not
Table.
new. He said it was been around for 14 years.
Yeah, it's been around 14 years. I am kind of undermining the organization, but they've been around 14 years. But of course, when we think about government and what needs to happen, it's filing a 501c3, and they have actually done that since last year. And so I did have a representative come and speak at the HHN meeting. And, you know, one of the elements of many homes that have been there is simply a table. And I've talked about how families have changed. And oftentimes when I or other kids would get home from school, to be able to go home, have a meal, sit at the table, talk about what's happened in your life, in your family life. This is an organization that's going to work closely with Joint Forces for Families and other organizations in the neighborhood. Find those families that are struggling from skills to gang prevention to career to jobs, whatever life skills they are. They will sort of be navigators within grassroots communities. And then hopefully we will be able to reduce the families that are underrepresented or marginalized or low-income communities that have struggled and continue to struggle with foster care placement or achievement gaps or criminal justice reform, all the things we talk about on a spectrum of racial disparities. And I know that this is outside of our box, but it is something that I'm very passionate about, knowing that I can't wait to see the positives after finding this organization continue to work in our community, so I hope that you'll support it.
The committee discussed just a little bit, as it is not a new organization, but a new funding relationship, community relationship that, and Director Tessman can speak to this, is that, we know that during the contracting process that they'll put together a budget and specifically identify what the funding will go for.
Did you want to enlighten us on the why?
Why what?
It's a divided vote at committee, it appears.
I think it was a no.
I think it was 4-1-1. No one spoke to the reasons why they did the way they did.
Belgium did have questions, I think, when I presented. Is it that quick?
He did, Supervisor Belgium did have questions, but they did not speak to why they voted.
Thank you.
Supervisor. Sorry, I don't know if this is how you guys do it, but it seems odd for us to talk about it when we're sitting
HHN 08 is $15,000 to support youth mentoring in Sun Prairie. Through our Neighborhood Navigators program, they have identified a need and a growing need over the last number of years about the need for youth mentoring. And I know that the county executive had put funding in his budget, but that was for very specific youth. And this is more on the preventative end and identifying. And our navigators are connected with all of the city and county services already. So this is going to be a great addition to providing for our youth and our families, particularly in Sun Prairie.
We'll move on and then take questions.
Yeah, so the next one is also Supervisor Weichliger's. It is to create an FTE homeless services coordinator, specifically looking at folks who aren't eligible for HUD funding. One of the things that was talked about was it being contingent on cooperation with the city, since this is not a full amount by itself that will be able to fund a full FTE position. One of the things we talked about in committee was this is something that is providing services that we're not really working as much in right now, and fills a gap.
And there is language in there that if the city does not partner with us, that this funding would not be released. Amendment 10, Supervisor Buckingham added additional funding at $75,000 originally. We bumped it down to $50,000 in partnership with the City of Madison and for the Focus Interruption Coalition. Currently, they were being funded at about $400,000. The budget that was introduced by the city moved it to $200,000. Alder Badar is working on introducing an amendment as well to try to fill some of that hole. Our understanding is that they serve approximately, thus far last year, they served approximately 200 people, but that does not include some of the families of the victims. They also work with victims and perpetrators. They are often being called in by the police in various communities, as well as other community entities that are engaged in a process when there is a situation, and a lot of times the situation also involves domestic violence, and that law enforcement and others have been relying on them to really come in and do some, again, different kind of community work than has been done. Our understanding is that there are several other communities outside the city of Madison and Dane County who are also relying on them, and they are in the process of trying to also figure out where they can go, not expand because they are already in some of these communities, but expand their pool of funding, and so that is sort of the next step in the process as well. And we are a small piece of that if we choose to be.
So this amendment is to increase funds by $50,000 towards the Rape Crisis Center for prevention work and direct client services work. There's a lot of different things that this could potentially impact, but something to note specifically looking to the campus area is that there's community services provided at the South Madison College campus, UW-Madison, the Truex campus, and Edgewood. Another thing that is trying to be expanded as well is working to add more office hours for people experiencing incarceration. Another thing that this program funds that is specifically youth-focused is the Dane County Game Changers, which is a countywide program, as well as the Gender Equity Clubs, which are only at East in Oregon right now, but with the hope to expand.
Amendment 12 is Supervisor Kilmer's, and he's asking to add $25,000 to expand the Dane County Needle Exchange Program. We all asked them the number of needles that are provided by this funding, and there is not a specific number, but what the $25,000 represents is them being open additional days on the weekend, I believe, and some evenings throughout the year to provide more opportunities for this program to exist. They are currently restricted by the amount of actual needles that they have to work through nights and weekends in this program.
So this amendment is really in two parts. One part of it is an increase in funding in the hotel healing and recovery in the Department of Human Services, but then it also is creating a process for that funding. It's supposed to allow open and public process for the funding awards, allowing for public engagement and hopefully also increasing awareness of the process. Then the review committee is not going to be exactly like the Pie Grant, but the thought is that it could be modeled after in some way. So having a review committee made up of board of supervisors and citizens.
And I think the impactful part of this whole amendment really is that you all have been doing work on mental health for well before my time on the board and well before some of your time on the board, and we are continuing to try to move forward as expeditiously but also thoughtfully as we possibly can. Director Tessman has said that she will continue to make sure that we are looking very strategically at not just how we spend money, but how are we providing services and how are our agencies providing services. I think across the country. Mental health challenges continue to be a really challenging issue for local communities in particular as it relates to mandates by state and federal government about how we serve people. And we just need to keep going on this. I think there are always going to be challenges, there are always going to be setbacks, but the goal of this amendment is to keep us moving forward in a place where we can continue to talk about mental health funding, we continue to provide innovative solutions to mental health funding, and we continue to think strategically about how we are serving folks in Dane County and how we can do better. There is no one that does not have the best interests of people in mind and not trying to do right by this by setting up a process where the public needs to be engaged, but the public needs to be engaged in this process. They have asked us to be engaged, they've asked us to be at the table, and we want to make sure that we continue to honor that and have them at the table. So that is what this process does, but it also is really setting the stage for working with the department moving forward and making sure we have a strategic plan. We will also continue to look at the analysis from the audit. I think if anyone has any great ideas about how we can get the private sector to participate in sharing data in this community so we can better serve the community, that I call on anyone to do that because it is a very important piece of this puzzle. But we also wanted to just really highlight how everyone that has worked in this arena, has done anything on this arena, is playing a part in moving us forward, and we need to continue to do that. We can't take a step backwards on this because the challenges are not going to wait. There were a couple of technical amendments to this too because we had the wrong date and for the public hearing timeline, but I guess it wasn't a technical amendment, but we also just deleted out the disbanding of the committee. So.
Deleted out
the subcommittee shall be disbanded once the funds have been removed. So, and there was another issue that came up at our first meeting, budget amendment meeting, and so I do want to bring it up because it's very important to all of us on the committee, but it's something that is also near and dear to my heart. We had some CPS workers come in and testify. They had also emailed some of us about the need for additional workers. They, I think, did a very good job of making sure that we all understood it's not because anyone is doing anything wrong, it's because this work is extremely difficult. They are working nights, they are working weekends. They don't punch a clock at 5 o'clock and tell their clients they have to go home and they can't talk to them or they can't have a crisis. And so our intake workers and our employees in child welfare really want to work with us on finding a solution for high turnover, but also some other avenues to make their job that they care really, really deeply about, or they would not do it. Make sure that they can continue to serve children and families. And I think what's happening is that as somebody leaves or someone goes on maternity leave, it's really hard for the department to fill those holes because some of them are coming back, and the time that it takes to hire somebody takes a really long time. So the department has said that throughout the next couple of months in this actual budget cycle, they will be bumping up some floater LTEs to deal with this year, and we will look to do some planning with the employees to develop some innovative solutions, talk about overtime, talk about that kind of possibility for the workers, and what we will need as far as positions in child welfare as we move forward in the next budget cycle. So I just didn't want to lose sight of that. We did not ask for any additional positions or funding at this time because the department said that they would work to try to fill some gaps, but we will probably and hopefully early in the next year be working with them to come up with ways to really just make sure that we're valuing the employees that are there that again can't leave when they're in a situation and are really our front line. And then I think we have a one capital amendment.
So this is Supervisor Doyle's amendment, and it is site funding for the Salvation Army. Their biggest issue that they talked about was they're the only women's only shelter, so they provide unique services in the county right now. And when they came and testified, they talked about just how deep the need is for this, and just how many different folks would be affected by this program.
All right, so supervisors, committee members, questions regarding these before we move on to a couple items that are going to introduce that. Supervisors' thoughts.
Quick question for the Salvation Army. Do we know what the cost is for pay to stay shelter? Is there a cost for women to stay at the shelter?
It's a nightly fee of $7 to stay a week at a time.
How much? I'm sorry.
$7.
And my second question was around Child Protective Service staff. Do you know what the ratio is for staff to cases? Are we over our capacity? Are we over our ratio for staffing?
So I don't think we're over our ratios right now, and we are meeting our state mandates. I think some of the testimony that we heard and some of the conversations that we're having underscore that it's due to sort of extraordinary efforts that are being made. But in terms of, are we technically in trouble or out of compliance, the answer right now is no.
Do you know what is the ratio?
I do not know that off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
Can you supply that to the committee?
You bet.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So in comparison to other counties, and given that I think all counties are different in their population and how many folks they believe they have to serve, I mean, I think the director is correct in that our ratio looks a little better than particularly some rural counties, more rural counties. And my understanding was that we were somewhere in the ballpark of like 30.
The reason I ask is because I know that we also had this problem within the last 12 years with our Child Protective Service. Our intake workers also report to us that there was a problem, and Director Green looked at the stats and we made some accommodations. And so I'm wondering if we're back at that place again that we were about 10 to 12 years ago. That's why I asked that specific question, because there was modifications made in that area.
Mm-hmm. And I don't want to speak for the folks who work there. I think what, to be fair to the department and to them, is what they said is that the cases are just more challenging too.
Mm-hmm.
So even if the ratio is as good or better than before, the cases that they're managing are really, really, really challenging. And sometimes they can't work on, 5 cases at a time when they're actually working with somebody who is maybe in crisis. So I think that's something for us to take into consideration. And I mean, I personally do not believe that even if we are below other counties, and I know that that's the federal and state mandated number. That's not the testament to whether or not we're actually serving our families. And as a full disclosure, as a person who went through social work school but didn't actually have to serve that many people, like these are special people who are willing to do this work. These women are, because they were the women that came to testify, they really, really care about these jobs. They care about their clients, and they're not saying they're going to leave. They're saying we need help with solutions, and they really believe in the mission and what they're doing. And for those that stick around, more than a couple of years, like it's really saying something, because it's a really, really difficult job.
Supervisor Stubbs?
I'm so finished, thank you.
I don't think I asked you about this, but going back to HH and 02, was the idea with this that outreach would, you would give them some funding and outreach would add that to an existing position? Or were they going to match funding?
I think that they were trying to work together some funds jointly, but I don't think it was clear because they didn't know how much we were going to be including. Yeah, I mean, they are what they believe they need, and I believe last year we increased the trans health provider
That's what I was gonna say.
to a part-time, but this is a different position.
This is a different position altogether. So the idea was that it would be a full-time position, right?
Yes.
Whether we gave 50, or whether we contributed 50,000 or 25,000. Okay, all right, thanks.
That's part of a contract, is it not?
No, this is a new position that they're creating. We would have to work out a contract if we gave it to them, but obviously the dollar amount is different than what Supervisor Kilmer estimated it at, so it would probably involve them finding some other funds to get it up to a full-time. But there's no contract currently on this position.
No, but it would be a contract as well.
Yep.
Other questions? All right, I have a couple. Back in the funds for eviction prevention, you mentioned that, made a distinction that this is separate monies from petty cash type of thing. I just want to be clear, though, that JFF offices have, that there is existing in the base budget and county executive's proposal include a bit more for eviction prevention as well.
Well, in
separate
their,
from
in their fund, yes, but that's,
yes. And
my
this is
understanding
added
is
to
that funding is for like making sure they can pay their electrical bill or if they're like 1 month behind. This is a bigger, and I will let Supervisor White speak to it, but my understanding is this funding is for a different housing challenge than just a one-time eviction prevention pot.
Okay, just for a quick, Sean, is that accurate? Is there, I mean, is there?
As I've heard it articulated by Supervisor Wade-Leitner, so the JFF eviction prevention dollars are intended for families that we're working with actively as part of the JFF offices. And it can be for ancillary expenses, it can be for those utility bill shut-offs, as Supervisor Kuhn was alluding to. What I've heard is the intent behind this particular pot of money is that it would actually be coordinated through coordinated entry, and it would be intended for people who otherwise might not qualify for eviction prevention dollars because of federal limitations around a lot of the funding that gets directed at this population is for the people who have lived experience being homeless and are not more at risk generally of homelessness issues. So I think that the intent behind these dollars is for a broader population that does not have access to a lot of the eviction prevention dollars that are already in the system.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, she's still here.
And she'll be
Did I get that?
speaking, she'll be speaking in a moment as well, so.
Okay.
Supervisor White. And then Amendment 7, this is the Stubbs Amendment for the. Yes, and so my question in this regard is, what's the decision process for where the services that they will provide is targeted? And how is that?
Well, I think that's a part of the process because they've been working west and they've been working south, which are already out by Albert Park and the Lake Point, the south sides of Madison. But I think because they've already been working with families, once if this is determined and we work closer with, it's going to be under Ron Chance's department, he can best help because we have JFF offices all over this county. So they would be able to funnel families once they're at a certain point directly to the JFF worker because you'll need a social worker to be engaged.
Okay,
So there are families all
So the work
over.
will be coordinated to JFF.
Work very closely with JFF.
And then lastly, for Sean, in regards to the CJ Tubbs fund and also the neighborhood fund, the 500,000 exactly included in the budget. I'm wondering, you're thinking that there'll be an evaluation component to the services that are generated through the funds, that we know that whatever we're funding, basically, that there's going to be some measurable results.
I don't like to ever have a contract that doesn't actually tell us if the money that we're putting out there is being used towards its intended purpose. So that's a very broad answer. But that would absolutely be the intent, is to, I think, based upon the language that's in the amendment, to get some of that feedback from the committee that would be established and that would inform. And then when you write an RFP, you always are clear, or you try to be clear about what the expectations are going to be and how those expectations are going to be measured.
And I think the intent of the amendment is that there's going to be criteria laid out that involves the supervisors from the various committees as well as the public. So that criteria will be laid out before proposals are even.
So we're establishing what
We're
we're
establishing
measuring,
the
so
criteria. We are inviting others to tell us what they think the
contract.
criteria should be. And then the advisory team will look through the proposals and make recommendations.
Thank you, those are my questions. There's no others. Thank you. We'll move on to testimony from registrants. Since we had some questions related to her amendment, let me begin with Supervisor Wedway.
Thank you. Well, as you know, we have a huge gap in terms of affordable housing in this county, and that gap is very significant for the people who are, below 50% of the area median income. And there are a lot of folks who are right over the HUD income limits for coordinated entry eviction prevention financial assistance. Today I spent all day at the courthouse helping to represent people who are facing eviction, and roughly probably 90% of the folks in eviction court are there because of an allegation of unpaid rent. And we have coordinated entry through our homeless services system that has two providers that kind of administer these eviction prevention funds that are funded by HUD and come through our local continuum of care. And so those providers are Tenant Resource Center and Porch Light. Tenant Resource Center actually has a staff at the courthouse to screen people initially who are facing eviction, which is really helpful to be able to connect to services that quickly. But if people call in through a coordinated entry system or show up at the beacon looking for help, they will be directed to these eviction prevention providers. The problem is that because so many people are in housing that is more than 30% of their income, monthly income towards rent, week when you have to stay home with your kid who's sick, or even one day, or your car breaks down. There are all these different reasons why you might fall behind because you just barely making it. And so if we can help more people with more flexible funding, we can help them stabilize and prevent them from becoming homeless in the first place, which is obviously good for them and their whole family if they're in a family household. But also it's more cost effective than having people go into the shelter, sleep in cars, and then try to get rehoused in this really tight rental market right now in Dane County. So we have a small amount of funds, and Supervisor Miles, you referred to funding that has been included and kind of slightly going up over the years that goes to JFF. But the vast majority of that funding is only eligible for families, and it's really a small amount. JFF gives out small grants, maybe $200, $300, and it's really intended to be for the families that they're kind of working with in an ongoing relationship. When I approached JFF to see if they would be interested in more funding of this kind, really they're not able to do that, and they weren't interested in doing that. And it came up in the committee conversation that JFF really doesn't want to be a place that people just go to get, you know, a grant or, you know, some money that they need for help. It's really more about creating this ongoing relationship in the neighborhoods to stabilize those families long term. So kind of conversely, the eviction prevention services that are provided through our coordinated entry system is more short-term assistance to help people with these, you know, 1-2 months of back rent to get them caught up to prevent the eviction and keep them in housing. So while, you know, I would love for this amendment to be $1 million, I put it in at $100,000 because that will make a real impact for people and go a long way. It was reduced to $50,000, but I think even that $50,000 would have an impact for individuals and families who right now aren't getting served because they don't meet those pretty strict criteria that's mandated through the HUD regulations. Let me just give you one example of how that works. So I know some folks who, the husband, you know, maybe middle age in their 50s, the husband had a stroke and was unable to work. And that meant, you know, out of work for a good, about a month or so during recovery, and then had no income during that time. But then got back to work. But by that time, you know, the eviction was in process, and you know, they were a couple months behind in rent. Well, when they applied for funding, because he was back at work, he was over that 30% area median income because they have to calculate income going forward the next 12 months. So that's just kind of one example of how those regulations don't always work well and as intended to help people that really need it for, you know, very obvious reasons like this. So anyway, I really hope that you will support the amendment. I'm happy to answer any other questions about that, but there is a tremendous need, and this is a cost-effective way to stabilize folks in this situation.
Any questions for Supervisor White? Thank you.
Did you want me to talk about my other ones now?
Yeah, you are registered on O and 9.
So I know Janny's here to talk about 09, and that Melissa's here to talk about C1.
Yeah, we have registered.
Yeah, so I'm not going to spend too long on them because they will give you a lot of good information about that. 09 is a position that came out of a work group that was created, a committee created by the Homeless Services Consortium Board to look at doubled up families. And this would be to cover half of a position, a county position, to kind of analyze the scope of the problem, develop some strategies, consult maybe with technical experts across the country, and try to find some funding sources to support families and individuals who don't meet the HUD, you know, Category 1 and Category 2 definitions of homelessness. So we have a coordinated entry priority list for housing, and that is based on people's length of homelessness and their vulnerability and dying on the streets. But you don't even get on that list until you've been homeless in shelter on the streets for 7 days. And you don't qualify, you're not considered homeless for the purpose of that list unless you're in shelter or on the streets. So if you're couch surfing, or if you're self-paying in hotels, like paying sometimes, you know, a ridiculous amount of money, think about the cost to stay in a hotel every night, and usually you're going to run out after a while into that month and then have to go on the street. You're paying all this money, but you're not considered homeless. So right now, we really don't have strategies, we really don't have programs to serve this potentially huge group of people. So this isn't about, you know, a provider providing direct services to this population. It's a significant population. It's about a staff person to help us study this problem. We do not have anything in place right now to fund any program. The only program right now that's serving this population is a small diversion program operated by the Salvation Army. That really the purpose is just to give small grants, grocery cards, gas cards to keep people out of the shelter system, but it really doesn't have the capacity to get them into stable housing, and that's what the goal is. So We were hoping to get some funding from the city of Madison to help match, because this is a significant problem in the city of Madison as well. We thought it'd be good to have it be housed within the county and then work with our partners at the city, because it's obviously also a problem outside the city limits. So we didn't want it just to be a city thing. Right now, I don't know if that funding is going to come through. You know, they just voted on the wheel tax. They've been really kind of focused in on that, but we will continue those conversations in the next couple of weeks in advance of the budget being voted on by the Common Council. Any questions on that one? Or? Yeah.
So I understand this amendment that the full-time coordinator position is contingent upon city funding. So if you don't get city funding, then you're not asking us to fund this position. Is that correct?
That's how it's drafted,
okay.
And I really, hope that will come through. I mean, there's other ways, of doing this, as you have all know from your experience, where we could, amend the language to make it position start July 1st or something like that. But, at this point, that is what Health and Human Needs has advanced, and we are continuing to have those conversations with the city and hoping for city support.
Great. Thank you.
But just to follow up on that, at this point, is it included in the
It's
recommended
not,
budget? Or is
it's
there an
not.
amendment in the
No,
process?
there really have been no kind of community services related amendments that have been introduced at this point in their process. So I think there's going to be some discussion about what they can do now in advance of the Common Council deliberating on the budget. So I think they are scheduled to take and vote on their budget November 13th, I believe. So anyways, I hope to have more information, but I don't know if it'll have more information by next week or not. So we'll certainly keep you updated.
Thank you. All right, and then I want to address capital item 1.
Yes, Melissa has testified to us when we met and had public hearing, I don't know, 2 weeks, a week and a half ago. This would support a purpose-built shelter for families and single women. As you probably know, the current Salvation Army building was not built to be a shelter for families or single women, and it is really, really limited in its capacity, and it's not a dignified place for anyone to stay or stabilize or get connected to housing. Salvation Army is pursuing a large capital development project that would include affordable housing and supportive housing for low-income folks, but also kind of a variety of different types of sheltering. So, and in terms of the sheltering, almost doubling its current capacity. And based on the numbers of people that have been turned away from shelter, like trying to meet the need, essentially, like of what the high levels of shelter applicants every night. I think the night before, and Melissa will probably have more updated numbers tonight, the night before HHN meeting, 26 families have been turned away. So anyways, it's really a crisis situation. And it's exciting to think that this, could really be the first purpose-built shelter for, intended to serve homeless people that we've ever had. And so it would include, space for single women and space for families, and this pay-to-stay model, which is a new model that people have visited and is run in a shelter out of Minneapolis, where people do pay, but that money is set aside to be used for a security deposit. So it's money that will come back to them, but it helps to kind of build a housing history. And people like that they kind of know that they've got a spot, that's their spot, and they're going to pay to stay in that shelter. And then that money that they pay will come back to them in the form of a security deposit that they can then use on their own place. There's also going to be some medical respite shelter. We do have, our first medical respite shelter, the Healing House, that opened. It has very limited capacity for families. This would, I believe, provide some more capacities for individuals in need of medical respite shelter. So anyways, and some SRO housing. So more, shared kind of space, but single room, private space. So there's a lot of details and there's more information online, and Melissa will get into those, but basically they are engaging in a big capital campaign. They're going through the city land use and city funding process now, and this $1.3 million that's being proposed, I think would help them as they pursue that capital campaign and other types of financing, including the WIDA tax credits that are really important for financing affordable housing projects. So the WIDA application will be due later before the end of this year, and the county support, I think, will be really meaningful to them in that process, and to show all the folks who are being turned away from shelter that we are paying attention, and we do want to make sure that they're safe and that we're supporting them and connecting to long-term stability and housing.
Any questions? Thank you, Supervisor White. All right, moving on to our registrants. First registrant wishing to speak in support of HHN Capital Item 1 is Melissa Sorensen. You'll have to pick it up.
Thank you. My name is Melissa Sorensen. I'm the Social Services Executive Director at the Salvation Army. Heidi just did a really great job of telling you all about it, so I'll just kind of give you some numbers and just kind of reiterate the importance of this project, that we are the only emergency shelter for families and women in all of Dane County. So anybody who experiences homelessness today, the only option to go is to the Salvation Army if you identify as a woman or have a child under the age of 18. And so often, every single night, like in 2018, we served 473 unduplicated women in our women's shelter, and 247 households comprising of 376 adults and 500 children in our family shelter. But on the other hand of that, we averaged being unable to serve 10 women every single night this summer and 16 families every night. Last night alone, as everybody knows, we had our first snowfall, but it wasn't a cold weather night, which is 20 degrees or below. So we were not able to serve 17 families last night in shelter. So those 17 families probably were in their car, or possibly doubled up, or potentially even on the streets. So the need is very high, especially as the winter months come up. And so I just wanted to say, to be able to have an opportunity to build a shelter to provide our most vulnerable neighbors in our community a space to be that is safe and offers them dignity and respect is huge. We're very excited about this possibility. And I just also wanted to clarify that in the emergency shelter, that there is not a charge. It's only the pay to stay. So folks do not have to pay in the women's shelter or family shelter. And that, I just wanted to say that, Heidi covered most of it, so just that this is very important, and that to be able to have an opportunity to provide more housing down in the corridor downtown for folks who wouldn't otherwise not be able to live down there, as well as having a space that provides safety for their family and themselves. So,
Thank you. Any questions for Melissa? Supervisor Beckett.
How much is your total project cost?
Estimated right now, it's around 30 million.
And what will happen if you don't get the Dane County money?
It's just another 1.3 million that we need to raise. We already didn't obtain which is why we're asking for 1.3 million. We didn't get it for the affordable housing piece. And so now it's going to dip into the shelter fundraising portion of it, whereas the WIDA tax credits and hopefully the city money will go towards the affordable housing piece. So it would just take longer, I guess, to be able to raise that money. If we are currently going through the feasibility study of being able to raise that in this community, and so it just puts another deficit in the pocket.
What is the projected capacity of the new thing, and what's the projected or planned location?
In the interim, so the location will be at the 630 East Wash site that we currently are at. And so we are in the process of obtaining the parking lot next door as well, where that Steve's Auto and empty parking lot are, so that it would provide enough space. It would be 88 women in our emergency women's shelter, which currently capacity is 45. And then 41 family units, and that current capacity is 22. There will be 40 some pay-to-stay spaces for the women, and then SROs, 14 medical beds, and the SROs are 30-ish. Sorry, I don't have that exact numbers right now.
That's fine, I just wanted to know.
Yeah. And currently our women's shelter, we do have a 90-day limit, so the women are only able to stay up to 90 days in a year. So it's not always consecutive. So women often save their nights for the winter times when it's colder, and so then are sleeping outside during the day. So we're hoping by having this extended capacity, they won't have a limit, and women will be able to stay every night that they need to stay.
Other questions? Supervisor Erickson.
So maybe this is a question for Chuck. So, excuse me, so you're going for the media tax credits, right?
Yep.
So is there a reason why this doesn't have any language in here stating that if they don't get that, yeah, contingency?
No, that could be added.
Okay. No, I was just curious because we added that with the baby one.
And I guess I would just say there's more components to this than housing. And so, if this amendment were approved, I mean, the committee could put some sort of time limit on the whole project, but there might be ways the county can contribute to the shelter development, whereas Bayview is just housing. An example of how, like with days, the county supported them with a capital grant. And, if they go out of that business, there's a payback provision or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a social service related effort,
right.
the statutes may allow us to participate in different ways.
Okay.
So we haven't explored or had a conversation with Salvation Army about what would be the best place for us to fit in.
Okay.
I think it might not be a bad idea to put some sort of a time limit. I mean, you have a fundraising effort.
Well,
If after 2 years or something the capital stack doesn't match up,
right.
then, our funds may not be available forever, but
Okay.
that's, maybe somebody can work that out in the next week or so.
Okay. And I had a couple more questions. So if you're facing the building on 630 East Washington Avenue, if you're facing that, are you looking at buying the parking lot that's to the right on the corner? Steve's Auto Sale?
Correct.
Oh, okay, so you'd buy that.
So then it'd be that whole portion of the block.
Okay, and then you would build that new there so you could still operate?
Yes.
Tear down or you're modeling?
It would be a complete tear down. The building is not worth saving. And so, yeah, we're looking at possibilities currently as to where the women's shelter would go. And then looking at the family shelter being in hotels during that time. We used to do a model with that, so would do that in the interim and then.
Okay. That's one more question. So if for emergency stays, do people have to pay?
Not for the emergency stay, no. It would only be the pay to stay portion. And that would serve folks who maybe are working on the overnights or because currently our shelter is only open from 4:30 p.m. until 8 a.m. So they have to leave at 8 a.m. So if someone's working, they don't have that opportunity. And it also it would be a little bit bigger space. They could stay there as long as they want. They would have the different hours. So it would also give them a chance to create some sort of housing history, and then that money would then go in to help with the security deposit. So it's just a little. In the Minnesota model, it was kind of, they called it higher ground. It was like a step up each kind of.
So you have the emergency situation.
Yep.
If it's whatever, really cold out or just emergency in that, there is no charge.
Correct.
But if you're like homeless for a longer term, then you'd pay a little bit.
If you wanted to move into that section of it.
So it's optional.
Correct. So some folks would rather be, if they, like I said, if they're working overnight or want to do, have that and create that housing history, that it would be an option.
Okay, is that for single women and families?
Just single women.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Any other questions? The next registrant wishing to speak in favor of capital item 1 would be, I believe it's Jane?
Yeah, yeah.
Dan? Coaster?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I come wearing 2 hats. I sit on the Homeless Services Consortium board, so I come representing their pieces and support pieces that they have put forth as recommendations also, which are the pieces that you're talking about tonight that speak to homelessness and eviction prevention in the specialist position. But I'm also here tonight because my day job is I am part of the transition education program in the public schools, in Madison schools. So my job during the day for the last 30 years has been to support students who are experiencing homelessness and their families. So I've been doing this a long time, and the need is not getting, the need is getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And when I first started, I had 40 students, and today, as of today, we identified 616 students since school has started. Last year, we ended up with 1,100 students. So the need and the support in our community for students who are experiencing homelessness is huge. And I come speaking from the family perspective because that's what I know most, but I also speak on the single perspective and couples without children who all have needs in our community, and we all need to support them all. So the Homeless Consortium piece is all singles, couples, families, and my work is families and youth who are on their own. So it's a huge world of mine. I don't like to come to speak without bringing the voice of the folks that I work with. And today I was working with a mom who stays in the shelter when she can, stays on the street when she can't, stays with friends when she can't stay in the shelter. She's one of those folks who bounces from staying in shelter, staying on the street, staying doubled up, and moves between the world of HUD, where she qualifies for housing resources, and moves between the world where she's doubled up and doesn't qualify. So one day she's on the housing list, the next day she's not. One day she's on the housing list, the next day she's not. It's always an unknown about what support she's eligible for and what kind of support she needs. But I said, what would you like me to bring tonight to this committee? And we actually came up with this today, and this is something we did together, and she calls it, "It may not be home." It may not be home, but it's all we got. A couple of beds, our bags and backpacks. It takes a phone call to get in and a conversation about our life over and over. But sometimes we have a place to stay. And when we cannot get in, we have to choose someone's car or the park or a friend's house if we can talk them into it. We sometimes can offer help with a grocery card, which came from the phone call that told us there was no place for us in shelter tonight. It may not be home, but it's all we got. Our lifeline to support and someone to listen to our trials. Someone to help us make good choices, someone to be there when we need hope. We cannot always get in. Too many are asking for help, not enough room at the inn for all of us. Our children are older, so they're not as at risk as the babies. We don't mind a baby in this weather. This is not good for them. It may not be home, but it's all we've got. We wish it were more often, more help, more space, but this is what we have. It would be nice to stay in a place every night so we could sleep more soundly. We could eat meals that are hot and find support that is nearby. Instead, we have to worry about what the plan will be. Will we get in? And if we don't get in, where can we go? What will we do? It may not be home, but it's all we've got. Family shelter, it's not enough. But when we take it, we will take it when we can get it. That's not a choice about that, because there's not enough spaces for all that need, for all of us that have a need. What I can say is that supporting this purpose-built shelter for Salvation Army is critical. When we have children in schools who are at shelter one night, and the next night they don't know where they're going to be, and they're at shelter the next night, and then the next night they don't know where they're going to be, they are not their best students at school. What we know about education is stability within a home is the best place for us to help provide stability in education. And if we don't have a shelter that lets them stay for at least a while someplace, it doesn't give them the grounding that they need to be their best students. So this new shelter will provide families for about a week to stay. So it's not every night they have to call in and every night they have to know what to do. I mean, there's communication and things going on. But that thought, for me, is wonderful.
Okay, Jane, you're over your 3 minutes.
Okay.
So.
All right, can I just say 2 more things?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Very quickly, please.
The other thing I want to say is that this homeless specialist position is really important to us because it speaks to those doubled up families, those families in hotels who don't have a support system in our community. And if we don't start talking about that and filling that gap in and figuring something out for that, we will not ever meet the 80% of my kids who are doubled up. 80%. 20% of them get in shelter. Some of that 20% stay in their cars. They're the ones who have access to services. The other kids don't. We are working really, really, really hard with the city, and it's our hope that we'll get through there too. So I appreciate that at least you've had this conversation. You say it's important. I really appreciate that. But without that support, these kids have nothing.
Any questions for Jane? Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Last person registered wishing to speak, and it is in support of HHN 5, which is the nutrition. Oh, my apologies. The person, Erin.
Fabrizius.
Fabrizius, thank you.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you this evening. My name is Erin Fabrizius, and I serve on the board of directors for Newbridge, Madison. We are one of the 12 focal points that provide services to our Dane County older adults. Newbridge specifically provides cost-effective services to about 10,500 older adults living in Madison and Monona. So this includes robust case management and senior nutrition programming, as well as a host of other services that are designed to help keep our older adults aging in place and living in their own homes. So the Newbridge board is strongly in support of the investments that this budget makes in older adult services, specifically increased funding for mental health care for older adults, as well as case management services. This funding is incredibly important to Newbridge and our other senior focal point partners because as Supervisor Kuhn said, we are seeing an astronomical increase in our aging population in Dane County and also across the state. And the Newbridge board would also like to ask for your support of the proposed budget amendment, HHN 05, that was authored by Supervisor Kilmer and passed unanimously by the Health and Human Needs Committee. This amendment provides cost to continue funding of about $23,630 for senior nutrition site management. The senior nutrition program meets an important need in Dane County as more and more of our older adults are at risk of malnutrition. Currently, 43% of seniors who access congregate meal programs are at high nutritional risk, while about 58% of seniors who eat at congregate meal sites report that that meal accounts for 1/2 or more of their daily food intake. Unfortunately, funding for nutrition site management has not kept pace with inflation or the increased need for labor to meet the demand for services. As of 2019, site management funding has increased by only 2.9% over 9 years. A number of our senior nutrition sites are struggling to hire and retain staff. Just as an example of that, Newbridge, at one of our nutrition sites that we operate, we have one staff position that has been vacant since May. So it's a challenge to find qualified people. Specifically, the challenge with senior nutrition site management jobs is that they're usually 3-hour chunks. So it's really hard to find people who want to give up 3 hours in the middle of their day to come do this work. Also, as Supervisor Kuhn alluded to, the pay is not necessarily attractive. These jobs pay about $13 to $14 an hour. And in addition to kind of the not ideal hours and wages, we're seeing more and more of our seniors in Dane County who have complex and challenging needs, specifically a large number of older adults who are homeless, who are suffering from mental health issues or other behavioral issues. So that kind of requires an additional skill set for the people who are managing these nutrition sites. So the additional funding provided by Supervisor Kilmer's amendment is needed to ensure that our Dane County nutrition sites can continue to operate and meet our demand for services. So be happy, thank you for your consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may
Questions
have.
for Erin?
Thank you.
Those are the registrants I have wishing to speak. Registering not wishing to speak include in support of HHN 4, Fran Hoffman of Town of Burke. In support of HHN 4, Eric Anderson of Town of Primrose. In support of HHN 4, Shannon Meyer of Madison. And in support of HHN 9 and 6, Janet Coastal. Those are all the registrants I have at this point. And that takes care of amendments portion of the agenda under section.
There's one more.
One more.
Yeah, 5.
Pardon?
You have
No.
5.
Oh, yeah, introduced after. Thank you.
And this amendment addresses the language at the beginning of the budget where there are specific text provisions in the budget. And in that, the current budget has the Human Services Reserve Fund set at $6,324,859. And this amendment, it's reflecting the $1 million for the grants for mental health. This amendment reduces the Human Services Reserve Fund by that $1 million, so it's able to balance that out as a revenue source for it.
Any questions on that amendment?
Where is this from?
In the budget, I think it's page 23 of the budget, perhaps. You'll see the balance of the various funds, and we have the Human Services Reserve, and we created that a number of years ago. And the idea, I mean, really, this is kind of a perfect example of something to use the Human Services Reserve on if we're going to spend from that fund at a time when we're not in a downturn. Part of it is to have money there. We're in a downturn to be able to have money so that we don't have to cut into human services. But in this, this is one-time money that could be used toward that because the Human Services Reserve gets money from one-time over, lapsing funds from the department.
Okay. Thanks.
Forgive me, but I don't remember how we comprise of dollars to go to the reserve. Where do we get the funding to make up the reserves for human services?
Oh, well, so this started as a mechanism in the budget. It's been repeated since the 2017. So at the end of the year, if there's a surplus from the Human Services Fund, that's where it goes. It doesn't lapse into the general fund. So it's pulled out and it's set.
Yeah.
So that's, in the exec's budget, it had some of that carried forward for 2021. This reduces that carry forward by $1 million.
Thanks.
Any other questions on that? All right. And again, we have a couple departments memos in our packet, Veteran Services and Human Services. Is there going to be a separate one from Badger Prairie?
No, I think that's included in Human Services.
All right, that takes us through section B of the agenda on to C, referrals of resolutions and ordinance amendments. The first one is OA 10, amending chapter 70 of the Dane County Code of Ordinances regarding parking ramp fees. Now, are we treating these as we would?
These would be moved and seconded and adopted next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, we're going to take action. Okay. All right. So is there any wishing to address the committee on what these are? Just
Unless somebody had public comment on them, I don't think we have
We have no registrants. So if there's any committee members have any questions on OA 10. Okay, and we move on to OA 12, amending chapter 41 of the Dane County Code of Ordinances, modifying landfill disposal fees. Any questions on OA 12? Okay, moving on to OA 19, amending chapter 67 of the Dane County Code of Ordinances, addressing airport terminal rent and landing fees. Questions? Okay. Then, the last item in this section is OA 25, amending chapter 54 of the Dane County Code of Ordinances, revising Alliant Energy Center parking fees. Questions regarding this OA? All right. Oh,
These we
so
vote
we're-
on the 5th then?
So on Tuesday, yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, all right, so with that, if there's no questions on those items, we do have a meeting tomorrow evening again to take up our last committee project. And there'll be a report as well regarding the participation rate on ballots and
So, obvious question. So, we're meeting on the 5th, which is next Tuesday.
Right.
We're not meeting
No.
the 4th, Tuesday the 5th.
But we have the 6th also reserved if
Right.
we needed it.
If we need it.
I'm just, I think PNF, I think Mondays.
Right.
To make sure. Or else I'll show up here and won't be here.
Chuckle by his own budget.
Tomorrow and November 5th, November 6th, if we need it, and we'll know that on the Tuesday. With that, public comment on items not on the agenda. Is there anybody with us still wishing to address the committee regarding an item not on the agenda? All right. Hearing none of that, so motion by Erickson to adjourn, seconded by Chenoweth. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. We're adjourned. 6-0.